Welcome back to Anime T23. Here we dive into the most intriguing what-if scenarios in the anime universe. In today's episode, we explore a world where Naruto Uzumaki, the future hero of Konoha, to protect his brother. Join us as we uncover how Naruto becomes Shinobi to protect his brother transforms into his greatest strength. What if Naruto's parents died and Naruto becomes Shinobi to protect his brother? Part 6. Chapter 26. Nothing is so painful to the human mind as a great and sudden change Sasuke sighed as another villager called out a greeting to him, nodding their direction half-heartedly. It was nothing compared to the attention he used to get just after he lost his family, but he still couldn't make it through the village without someone noticing him. He just wished people would leave him alone. He wasn't interested in fake greetings and superficial talk. He had his small group of people he tolerated and wouldn't disrupt his goal. Looking back, he was more grateful for the Uzumaki clan than he would ever admit out loud. Naruto and Kazuya weren't afraid to treat him like any other kid. Naruto always nagged him about leaving his workout gear around the flat, and Kazuya didn't hesitate to drag him to help in the kitchen. It was still nothing like it had been with his real family. Nothing ever would be. But they didn't make him feel like the poor Uchiha kid with the dead clan. They also helped him to get stronger. Naruto genuinely believed he could achieve his ambition to track down Itachi and confront him about the massacre. He wasn't naive enough to believe Itachi would just stand there and answer all his questions, so he needed to get strong enough to beat him. The Uzumaki clan was weird and their training exercises were unconventional, but he did feel like he was making progress. He even felt okay with his team. Sakura still annoyed him more times than not, but she was becoming more tolerable the longer she was exposed to Kazuya. Ryo was the same as he always was, and that worked for him. The youngest Uzumaki was almost as motivated as him in wanting to surpass his older brother, although for very different reasons. Kakashi was a very laid-back sensei who had a tendency to focus too much on team-building exercises, but Sasuke, suppose it could be worse. He felt a nudge to his ribs, and he looked over at his blonde friend, Ryo's violet eyes scanning his face carefully. "A yen for your thoughts." HN. Ryo rolled his eyes, but Sasuke caught the small smile at the corner of his mouth. Of course. What other answer would an Uchiha give? Sasuke narrowed his eyes, but Ryo was no longer paying attention. His gaze locked on something in front of them. Sasuke followed his stare and saw that they were coming up to the Hyuga compound. Two figures stood in front of the gates, and as he recognized the shorter of the two, he groaned. "Hinata!" Ryo bounced towards the Hyuga, and Sasuke dragged his feet. Ryo's crush was so painfully obvious, and now Sasuke would have to spend far too long watching him fawn over the girl and dance around his feelings instead of just telling her that he liked her. "Hi, Hinata!" Ryo said breathlessly. "Hi, Hinata," Ryo said breathlessly. Sasuke caught up and nodded to her before turning his attention to the tall man next to her. He was obviously a Hyuga judging by his pale eyes and delicate, regal features, but there was sternness to him. In a white robe with an olive overcoat, he didn't appear to be an active nin. He might be one of the higher-ups. The man cleared his throat, and Ryo finally noticed that Hinata wasn't alone. The stars fading from his eyes. "Hyuga-san, this is my father, Hyuga Hayashi," Hinata introduced quietly. So it was the highest up then. He didn't look anything like Hinata. She must take after her mother. Ryo flinched, bowing low and squeaking out at Hyuga-sama. "Father, this is Uzumaki Ryo and Uchiha Sasuke," Hinata continued almost nervously. "They were in my class at the academy." "Were they?" Hayashi's pale eyes scanned them carefully. Sasuke met his gaze without flinching. He may have been the clan head, but technically, so was he. He may have to wait until he becomes Chunin to take up the title officially, but the Uchiha were just as important a clan as the Hyuga, even if they had the edge on numbers now. "Uzumaki? Any relation to Uzumaki Naruto?" Hayashi switched his stare to the blonde. "Yeah, he's my big brother," Ryo answered, some of his nervousness fading. "I see." Hayashi was silent for a long moment, and Sasuke shuffled his feet, pointedly ignoring the pitiful glances that Rio and Hinata kept shooting at each other. "You are welcome here any time," Hayashi finally said, tilting his head. Sasuke joined Rio in staring blankly at the man. The Hyuga weren't known for being welcoming. Sasuke didn't think they were capable of it. "I owe your brother a great debt, and I told him that the Hyuga would always be here for both him and Arai Kanzuya. He has not taken us up on this offer, so I will extend it to his family." Judging by the surprised looks Hinata was throwing at his father, Sasuke gathered this was not normal behavior for the man. "Now! Hinata has a training session, so we must bid you good day." Sasuke watched the man retreat back into the compound, Hinata shooting longing glances back at Rio as she followed him obediently. Sasuke gave Rio a second to stare after her wistfully before he grabbed his arm, dragging him down the street. Once Rio started walking under his own power, he let go. Didn't she look so pretty today? She looks so nice with short hair, and the two stands frame her face like a picture, you know? She must be comfy in that parka too. I love that she dresses for function, but she still shows her personality too. She looks the same as she always does. Rio frowned at him, the spell broken briefly. "You have no appreciation for girls. How will I ever live with myself?" He just didn't see the appeal. Most of the time they were loud and annoying, and they didn't say what they were really thinking. Boys were like that too, though, so Sasuke really couldn't win. He had other stuff to be doing anyway rather than fawn over some idiot who won't matter in a few years. "I can't escape Nissan." He looked back over at his friend to see his expression had changed. The glow that came with talking about Hinata had been replaced with the frustration that occasionally came up when Rio talked about his brother. Rio adored Naruto, but more and more Sasuke could see Rio wanting to escape his shadow. One day, Nissan is going to be known as Rio's brother. Rio vowed firmly. Sasuke followed his friend to the streets of Konoha, to the training ground, where they were meeting Sakura. Hopefully it would be one of her better days, where she kept her distance. He could live in hope. Kanzuya threw a balled-up napkin at Hana's head. She snatched it out of the air, rising from her slouch on the couch to look at it curiously. She raised her eyebrow at him. "I don't want you to make a mess on the couch," he explained as he carried a plate of mochi over to the coffee table. He placed it down before flopping onto the other sofa. "Just because Momo is out with the boys doesn't mean I need you taking her place." "I love coming here." Hana grinned widely, her sharp canines flashing before she shoved one into her mouth. "You wouldn't know it," Kanzuya said dryly. "How long has it been?" She swallowed the dessert and smiled sheepishly. "Too long," she admitted. "I've just been so busy with my vet studies and raising the new pups, and you haven't exactly been round to the compound either." "Yeah, I know," Kanzuya sighed. "There is just no time for anything right now. Who knew that our genin days would be the most relaxing? I thought we would have free time between missions or something when we got older. Now we're older, and I barely have time to cook. You wouldn't change a thing, though, would you?" Hana smirked knowingly. Kanzuya held up the pretense for a moment before he gave up. "No." She laughed loudly, throwing her head back. She hadn't changed much. Her long brown hair was tied back into a low ponytail with two strands hanging down into her face. Dark eyes sparkled with mirth, and her wide grin moved the two long, red triangles that were on the cheek of every Inuzuka. She had left her Chunin vest at home, wearing only black biker shorts and a black vest. She was much taller and her figure had filled out, but she was the same old Hana. Had he changed much since he was a genin? He tended to favor the slim, slightly loose black trousers that most shinobi wore. He still loved his purple tunics, although he tried not to wear them at the hospital, and his worn and weathered brown waistcoat had been upgraded 2 years ago. His wavy brown hair hung over his forehead and reached just below the nape of his neck. He still got a lot of comments over the usual pink color of his eyes. Maybe he hadn't changed. He was just a taller, more filled-out version of his 12-year-old self with less time and more men. "What's wrong?" Hana spoke up, interrupting his internal spiral. "You look like you're having a crisis. Have I changed since we were genin?" He was taken aback at the incredulous look Hana shot at him. Where did that come from? I just mean, like I haven't changed my style or my interests or anything. Hana sat up properly, leaning over to gaze right into his soul. Kazuya, you pretty much run the emergency department in a Shinobi village at 18 years old. Do you realize how insane that is? You're confident and accomplished, and don't think I haven't been hearing about your ways with the men of this village. Something loosened in him at her words. He was about to reply when the front door swung open. They looked over to see Naruto walk in, dumping a bag and lighting up when he saw them. Hana. Hey, Naruto-chan. Kazuya quirked an eyebrow. There's something different about you today. Where's your jumper? It was way too hot today for that. Naruto shrugged. I've been stuck in the communications department all day, and that office is a greenhouse. Birds or radio? Radio? Hey! Hana interrupted. We were just talking about how we've changed since we were genin. I think you've changed the most, Naruto. Kazuya looked over at her in surprise before he surveyed the redhead. He hadn't really noticed since they lived together, but if he thought back to 5 years ago, he really had. His long red hair was tied up in a high ponytail, and the straight ends brushed the tops of his shoulders. His blue eyes had darkened another shade, and the scar on his face had faded to an almost invisible line. His brace was missing, so he was left in a plain, black t-shirt that hugged his lean form, and his left arm tattoo was on full display. It was the only full-sleeve tattoo Kazuya had ever seen that reached the end of the fingertips. He knew there were others beneath the fabric, and he narrowed his eyes suspiciously as a few black lines peeked out the collar of his t-shirt. Did he get another one? He wore the same shinobi pants as Kazuya did, and they matched his black sandals. He was tall, too, taller than both him and Hana. Kazuya was pretty sure he would reach Genma-sensei's height sometime soon. You got hot, Hana grinned widely. Naruto scoffed as he moved further into the room, plopping himself down beside Kazuya. No. I have to agree with Hana. Kazuya nodded. You did get hot. It's amazing what the lack of orange can bring. Maybe I'm just having a good day, Naruto said casually, throwing Kazuya a pointed look as he helped himself to mochi. So he was feeling better today. It was hard to imagine he was sick on days like this. You must be getting suitors throwing themselves at you. Hana laid back down on her back, her head turned to face them. I've heard that redheads are in right now. Naruto's face twisted in distaste, and Kazuya snorted. What? Hana propped herself up on her elbows. No interest at all? Hana, Naruto began slowly. I'm not exactly a catch. Hana looked at Kazuya, conveying the utter absurdity of that statement. Kazuya rolled his eyes, agreeing with the sentiment. Naruto, have you actually looked at yourself in the mirror? She demanded. Yes. Naruto protested. Hana, I'm so busy with my jobs. I wouldn't have any free time to dedicate to a relationship. Who said anything about a relationship? Kazuya piped up. And I have the kids and my obligations to Shikaku, and any free time I have is either making new seals or training, so I don't get soft. Naruto continued as if he hadn't spoken. I wouldn't have the time even if by some miracle there is someone out there who would want me and all my baggage. His best friend was the most oblivious guy Kazuya had ever met. He was apparently completely missing all the looks that were directed his way whenever he was out in the village running errands. He was willing to bet there were some people at his work too that liked Naruto a bit more than the redhead was aware of. What's your preference anyway? Hana asked. I know Kazuya sticks to guys, and I'm partial to all, but you've never said. I've never thought about it. Naruto shrugged. Ake-chan, Kazuya finally stole some machi for himself. You are a young, red-blooded guy in his prime. How are you thinking of anything else? Naruto actually seemed to take a moment to think. He began. It just never occurred to me. I just have so much other stuff to do that it never seemed like a priority. It just never seemed like a big deal. There are plenty of other things I'd rather be doing than having sex. Kazuya and Hana shared a look. It's like Genma-sensei isn't our role model. Just because we had a man that sleeps around as a teacher doesn't mean we would pick up his bad habits, Naruto huffed. Kazuya definitely picked up those bad habits. Judging by Hana's responses, so had she. It was only Naruto who'd escaped. So tell me what else you guys have been up to. Hana abruptly changed the subject, silently communicating to Kazuya that they'd discuss it later. Kazuya nodded before immediately jumping into the latest disaster at the flower shop. A man had been caught buying flowers for both his wife and his mistress, and they had both confronted him. Kazuya was rooting for them to leave him and elope together. Hana agreed with him. The chatter filled the flat, and Kazuya relaxed back into the couch as he listened to his two best friends in the world argue over the merits of a kunai over a shuriken when opening a difficult jar. Naruto looked up nervously at the massive pale yellow house. The fence in front of it was taller than him, and the green rooftops were dark beneath the cloudy evening sky. Yellow light emitted from the double front door and the visible windows. The garden was full of bushes and trees and flowers, and Naruto considered just abandoning the whole evening. The Inuzuka compound had been fine since it was as chaotic and unorganized as the occupants, so he hadn't felt like he was intruding. He had only ever been to the Uchiha compound twice, and they weren't experiences he wanted to remember. This place looked clean. He was sure he would ruin something the moment he stepped over the threshold. Naruto? He looked over from where he was frozen at the gates to Shikaku, who had already opened the door. Sorry, Shikaku. He scratched the back of his head sheepishly. It's just such a nice house. Nothing you haven't seen before, Shikaku said dismissively. I guess, he replied nervously. He followed the clan head into the house and toed off his sandals. He accepted the pair of house slippers gratefully and shoved them on. Maybe he should get them for his flat. He then considered how much traffic came through his home and immediately dismissed the idea. There was nowhere to keep that many pairs anyway. He could feel a couple of signatures moving around the house, so he wasn't startled when a loud voice rang out. Shikamaru, get the rice from your father. Can he not bring it to you himself? Move, Shikamaru. We have a guest tonight, so I want your best behavior. Naruto smiled to himself as he felt the familiar chakra signature make its way towards them. The young Nara appeared round the corner, grumbling to himself about a troublesome woman. He looked up from the ground and spotted him, his posture slumping. It's just you, he drawled, holding a hand out of the bag of rice that Shikaka gave to him. Dad just said it was someone from work. I feel so welcome, Naruto grinned in response. What a drag. Shikaku turned to him in amusement. If I had any doubt that you knew my son, it's gone now. Oh yeah, Naruto laughed. I've known him and Chuji for a while. They came over to see Ryo or pick him up while they were in the academy. They've also left their homework at mine more times than they'll probably admit. He felt the second signature, and soon a woman with mid-length brown hair. Shikamaru's eyes and a pink blouse came into view. You must be Uzumaki-kun. She smiled softly. Shikaku has told me all about you. There goes my good first impression then, he joked, drawing forth a laugh. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt for now, she winked. Go into the living room with Shikaku. I'll call you both when dinner is ready. Naruto bowed slightly as she walked back to the kitchen. He then raised an eyebrow at the look Shikaku was shooting at him. It was the same look on Shikamaru's face as he peered back around the corner. How did you do that? Shikamaru asked suspiciously. Naruto frowned, confused. What do you mean? Shikaka shook his head, laughing to himself as he gripped Naruto's shoulder and led him through the house. They arrived at an open space with pillows dotted around and a low kotatsu in the middle of the room, a board and some pieces of wood set on top of it. Naruto took a seat opposite the clan head, settling onto the blue pillow beneath him. Shikaka began to arrange the pieces on the board. Shikamaru also joined them in the room, taking a seat nearby. Naruto suspected he wanted a nap, judging by how much he was slouching. So, tell me what you know about shogi. Shikaka handed over a pile of wooden pieces. It's a game? Naruto took them and placed them on the table. Strategy or something? How do you not know how to play shogi? Shikamaru was alert now. It's shogi. It wasn't something we ever needed. Naruto shrugged, his focus on reading the pieces. All our money went toward stuff we needed to survive, and shogi is kind of a luxury. He paused. I suppose we could have made a board, but when would we have had time to teach ourselves? He missed Shikaku's pointed look towards his son. Ryo knows how to play, Shikamaru continued, although a bit more subdued. I taught him when we were in the academy. Naruto looked up and beamed. That's great. I'm surprised that you could get him to sit still long enough to teach him. So, Shikaku interrupted. Shogi is indeed a strategy game, also referred to as the general's game. Set your pieces out in direct symmetry with mine. Naruto nodded and began to place the little wooden pieces on the board, watching Shikaku's side carefully so he didn't make a mistake. Once the board was set, Shikaku pointed to the large piece directly in front of him. The objective is to capture the enemy's king, which is referred to as checkmate. You also have your gold, silver, knight, lance, bishop, rook, and pawn. All except the king and gold can be promoted, Shikaku explained, pointing to each of the pieces in turn. Naruto scanned the board, committing the names to memory. Now, each of these pieces moves differently around the board. For example, the lance can only move forward. Why? Naruto asked, confused. Why what? Why can the pieces only move in a certain direction? That's the rules, Shikamaru said. But why are those rules? Naruto answered back. He appeared to have broken the kid, as the young Nara just stared back at him blankly. He turned, and while Shikaku didn't seem like he was in the same state of confusion, there was a particular look in his eyes. Dinner. We'll pick this back up after, Shikaku said, rising to his feet. Naruto scrambled up and followed the man through to the dining room, Shikamaru right behind them. He took a seat and awkwardly waited as the family bustled around him, Yoshino ordering the men about like she was a general herself. Finally, all the food had been set onto the table, and the Nara family sat down with him. Help yourself, Uzumaki-kun. Yoshino smiled at him. Thank you, Narsan, but please call me Naruto. He smiled back. I'm only Uzumaki-san when I'm in trouble. Call me Yoshino then. There are too many Nara roaming around the village to use my clan name. Naruto placed some steamed vegetables on his plate with some pickled ginger and rice. So tell us more about yourself, Naruto-kun, said Yoshino. You seem a bit young to be working with Shikaku. You calling me old? Shikaku frowned good-naturedly. Nah, I get it. Naruto laughed. Usually the people that work with the Jounin commander are much higher up the food chain, and therefore much older. I've been working at the desk for 5 years, and I'm still the youngest there. So, Chunin at 10? Yoshino asked curiously. Yeah. Naruto grinned. It took us 3 years to convince Genma-sensei to let us go. We were going to go the year before, but it was an IWA. Ryo says you graduated after only 2 years at the academy, Shikamaru added. Yeah, it was a deal I made with Hokage-sama. Naruto's smile dimmed at the thought of the old man. Ryo and I were only allowed to move out of the orphanage when I became a genin, so I had a lot more motivation to graduate early than my peers. Kanzuya and Hana hated the academy too, so between the 3 of us, we made it out in half the time. I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. Wait, so you moved out at, 7? Who looked after you? Yoshino had put down her chopsticks. Kanzuya moved in with me, so between the 2 of us we had enough to live on. Naruto was quick to reassure. I think we turned out some pretty great kids too. No! Who raised you and your brothers? I raised Ryo, Naruto said slowly, not understanding the question. So, who raised you? Shikaku asked, and Naruto frowned at the grim look on his face. I didn't need to be raised. He threw them a strange look. I had everything under control, and I had Genma-sensei, so if I was really stuck, I had someone I could ask for advice. It's not like I went my whole life without an adult in my life. It's just I didn't really need one. He couldn't read the look shared between the other adults. Shikamaru's face was pinched, and Naruto couldn't help but feel that he'd said something wrong. He knew his life had been a bit unconventional, but everything had turned out okay. Sure, there were times he wanted someone else to take care of things and take the weight off him, but he'd managed. So, where are the rest of them tonight? Shikaka said, forcing a grin. Naruto wanted to ask what was up, but he would take the escape when offered to him. Kanzuya is finishing up a hospital shift and then going out for drinks with Hana. Ryo and Sasuke are camping out in the training grounds tonight with Sakura as part of their mission preparation training, although I would bet a good yen that Kakashi is asleep by now. Gunma-sensei is hanging out with Reito, but I suspect they'll go out to join Kanzuya and Hana at the bars by the end of night. You didn't want to join them? Yoshino asked, her smile returning if a bit stiff. It's not my scene. Naruto waved a hand dismissively. I have to be up early to speak to the registry tomorrow, and I don't drink anyway. I'm the boring one of the family. Shikaku choked on a piece of fish. He struggled to swallow and looked over at him. I don't think anyone would ever describe you as boring, Naruto. Naruto laughed as settled into casual conversation. He didn't know he had been so reluctant to take Shikaku up on his offer for shogi and dinner. This was nice. He would have to do this more often. Ryo moved through the seals, determined to finally get this right. Jajui no Jutsu. He glared as the muddy water remained muddy, refusing to clear into something drinkable. He'd been trying to get this since their mission prep training the other week, but he wasn't having any luck. Sasuke and Sakura and both managed it within the first few hours, and he didn't get why he couldn't. Hey, Sunshine. Nisen smiled at him as he entered the flat, throwing his orange jacket onto the kitchen table. Today was nuts. I swear Konoha is slowly trying to make me lose my mind, but I'm done for the rest of the day and free to hang out here for the rest of the day. Ryo still thought it was strange that his rank was written on the back. Kazune had changed it from Chunin to Tokubetsu Jounin sometime after their promotion. Why didn't he just wear the Jounin vest that was hidden away in his closet? What are you up to? Nisen peered curiously over his shoulder. I'm trying to get this dumb water technique to work. Ryo sighed heavily. It's supposed to make water drinkable when we're out camping. Ah, yeah. One of the ear-rank you have to learn before you're let out of the village. Nisen moved to sit down on the other sofa. What's the issue? How can I help? Ryo knew his brother meant well, but he didn't need this today. I'm fine, Nisen, he said shortly. I don't need your help. Nisen smiled dim slightly, but Ryo was too annoyed to care. Sunshine, it's okay if you need it. I can't count the number of times I had to cheat off Kanzuya's answers back in the academy. No one person is ever going to be good at everything. I'm not you, Nisen. Ryo snapped. I don't need your help, and I'm going to do this on my own. I don't need you holding my hand or treating me like I'm your dumb little brother. I get enough of that from the rest of the village. Nisen looked taken aback, his mouth slightly open. What do you mean? Who's saying that? Nisen leaned forward intently. Do you want me to speak to them? No. Ryo yelled. That is exactly the problem. You need to stop trying to help or protect me or butting into everything. How am I supposed to get out of your shadow if you're constantly hovering over me? Ryo was far too angry to see the hurt that spread across his brother's face. It's like you don't think I'm capable of anything. You just want to do everything for me and don't want me to have any freedom. Ryo, I just want to help, Nisen said quietly. I want you to have the best chance at everything, and if I can make that happen, I want to. I didn't mean to make you feel like I don't believe in you. I do. I think you're capable of anything. Nisen's words didn't make Ryo feel better. You're so suffocating sometimes. Maybe I just want to figure things out on my own. Everyone says how it's so amazing that you graduated early and raised me and handled everything on your own, and I am never going to live up to that. Ryo, I wouldn't want you to, Nisen frowned. I haven't had much choice in my life, and although I wouldn't change a single thing, I did all that to make sure you wouldn't have to live through what I did. You treat me like I can't do anything. Ryo stood, knocking over the bowl of water onto the table and floor. You don't treat Sasuke like this. You give him space and wait for him to ask for help, but me, you just barge in. He heaved a breath in as he watched the water drip onto the floor. This had been building up for a while. He just wanted to be taken seriously, and he felt like he would never get that from Nissan. He would always see Ryo as a little kid. That meant the rest of the village would see him as a little kid. Nissan didn't realize how much influence he had over the village, or just how many people he knew. Ryo couldn't escape, whether he was at home or not. How was he supposed to be the Hokage one day if he couldn't even be recognized as his own person? Would they announce at the ceremony that Naruto's brother was now Hokage? Not even use his name? He doubted Gigi and the Yondaime had someone hovering over them their whole careers. I have to go. He stomped towards the front door, ignoring the calls of his name behind him. He needed space to think, and he needed to do that far away from Nissan. He was sure he would feel bad about his words later, even if they were true. He didn't know how to deal with all the anger and inferiority and frustration swirling around inside him. He always spoke to Nissan when he was younger, but now his brother was a problem. Kazune would always listen to him, but he was closer to Nissan, and they were a team. The only one he could think to talk to is Kakashi, but he didn't think his godfather would understand. He meant what he said to Nissan. He wanted to deal with things on his own. He would just have to figure it out himself. Kazuya placed the plates down on the table, checking the clock. Sasuke was here, but Ryo and Naruto were pretty late. Sasuke didn't know where Ryo was, and Kazuya knew that Naruto only worked the first half of the day today. The door opened, and he smiled at Ryo as he kicked off his sandals, shuffling into the room. It dropped as he saw the slouch on the kid's shoulders and the torn look on his face. Something was wrong. Ryo, are you okay? The kid turned tear-filled violet eyes to him, and Kazuya immediately went over to him, hugging him to his chest and burying his face into the unruly blonde locks. Ryo's arms came up to wrap around his back, and Kazuya hugged him tighter. It was a long moment before he felt Ryo starting to let go. "Hey!" Kazuya said softly. "What happened?" "I'm a horrible person," Ryo mumbled. Kazuya planted his hands on Ryo's shoulders and made him look him in the eye. "You are not a horrible person, and I do not ever want you to say that again." "Now, what happened?" "I said some really horrible things to Nissan," Ryo admitted. "Okay," Kazuya nodded. "Were they true?" Ryo shot him a confused look. "These absolutely horrible things you said, were they true? Is that how you really feel?" Yes. Not of all of it, but yeah. So you held everything in and didn't talk about it, and then it all burst out in a way you didn't mean for it to." Ryo nodded. "So the issue is how you said it," Kazuya concluded, "which could have been solved if you had sat down and spoken about it before it became an issue." Ryo nodded, shrinking into himself. "Ryo, everyone loses their temper," he said, smiling slightly. "What's important is you recognize what you did wrong and work to make sure it doesn't happen again. If you have complaints or issues, you know you can talk about it with us, and we will work towards making things better." "I know," Ryo said quietly. "I know you guys are always going to be there for me, but that's part of the problem." Kazuya nodded, beginning to guide his kid towards the dinner table and sitting him beside a silent Sasuke. "First, you're going to have something to eat. Once Naruto comes home, we are going to sit down and discuss it properly, okay? Then we can try to figure out a solution." "Wait, Nissan isn't here?" Ryo looked around the flat. "I take it he was here earlier?" "Yeah. Then I left, but he said he was going to be here all day." Kazuya frowned before he reached forward to ruffle Ryo's hair, hiding his unease. "He's probably just training or got sucked back into work." He laughed nervously. "You know what he's like." Kazuya really hoped it was true. It would be characteristic of him to be doing that, but judging by what Ryo said, it may not be that simple. If he didn't appear by midnight, then he would ask around, just to be safe. Naruto watched the sun rise over the village from his place, on top of the Hokage mountain. His stomach had stopped growling a couple of hours ago, and he still didn't feel tired. He was sure he would regret sitting in the same place for almost 10 hours the moment he tried to get up, but he didn't feel like moving. He just needed peace and quiet to think. "You know that Kazuya has been asking everyone about where you are. He even roped in Anko, So I don't have to tell you how much trouble you're going to be in once he finally tracks you down. And reality found him. What do you want, Kakashi? The silver-haired Jounin plopped himself down next to him, propping his head on his fist as he looked at him. I'm just doing my part in the great Naruto search. Naruto rolled his eyes. I disappear all the time. I don't know why he's so concerned about it this time. Yeah, but no one has seen you at work, and with how upset Rio is, he assumed that this was not one of your normal work too much for your own good things. Naruto sagged. Shit, Rio. Wanna tell me what's up? Rio and I had an argument yesterday, and I just totally bailed. He dropped his head into his hands. Fucking shit, I'm a terrible brother. What kind of adult just runs away when their kid throws a tantrum? Naruto, he ignored him. There was a deep sigh. He felt hands grabbing his and pulling them away from his face. Kakashi's gray eyes scanned over his face before he placed Naruto's hands down into his lap, still holding them tightly. Naruto, as much as you believe otherwise, most people your age don't have to raise any kids. Kakashi, it's not like I've ever been a kid myself, Naruto scowled. I know, and I would never treat you like one. You're all grown up now. The outside finally matches the inside. Naruto was about to speak, but Kakashi continued. That doesn't mean you aren't allowed to take a break or make mistakes. My mistakes hurt my kids, Naruto said quietly. He bit his lip as he tried to sort through his feelings. It's just so much more difficult than when Rio was younger, you know? He began, I don't know what I'm doing, not really. I'm doing the best I can in trying to help him, but he doesn't want my help. He feels like I'm overprotective, and that I don't think he can do things by himself. And when I do, he's going to be so strong and go so far. It's just if he needs help and I can give it. Why wouldn't I, you know? He's pretty much a teenager, Naruto. He imagined Kakashi was smiling behind that mask. Remember what you were doing at his age. He's always going to compare himself to you. But why? He can do so much better than me. Because you're his idol. Kakashi sighed as he should already know this. He looks up to you and wants to make you proud. But I'm always proud of him. Naruto shook his head, confused. Yeah, but he's too busy trying to prove himself to know that. Naruto looked back at the man with a raised eyebrow. Where did this responsible and reasonable Kakashi come from? He attempted a smile. Should you not be reading your porn book or being late or messing with guy? Sleeping in a tree somewhere? He expected Kakashi to respond with a teasing answer of his own, but the man's shoulders dropped. He began to pull his hands from Naruto's, but this time he grabbed them tighter, stopping them in his tracks. Hey, your turn to spill your soul. I know that I let you down a lot when you were younger. Kakashi looked away from him. You probably wouldn't have all these problems if I had stepped up like I should have. Kakashi, we've talked about this. You had your own stuff going on, and yes, while you could have been better, no one holds anything against you. You've been a lot better, especially in the last 3 years. I still feel like I'm failing, though, Kakashi admitted. I don't know how to handle a genin team. I've had them on team-building exercises and D ranks, and I know I should be training them more in everything else, but it's like I'm stuck. I want to be a sensei, like Minato-sensei, but I can't. It's like if I try to do more with them, I'll screw it all up. Naruto let out a laugh, and Kakashi looked over at him, betrayed. No, I'm sorry. It's just we make quite a pair. He tried to swallow down his laughter. We have no idea what we're doing, and no one can tell us how to do it. We just have to forge ahead and make a bunch of mistakes and live with them for the rest of our lives. Kakashi shook his head, but Naruto could see the amusement appeared on the parts of his face not covered by his mask and hideate. What are we going to do? Naruto asked quietly, the laughter dying. I have no idea, Kakashi replied. Naruto finally registered what he was doing, and he abruptly let go of Kakashi's hands, clasping his own in his lap. I guess I should go home and talk to Rio, he said casually. And Kazuya for that matter. Yeah. Neither of them moved. Naruto looked up from his hands and back out towards the village, admiring the glittering leaves of the forest surrounding the village. It really was a beautiful view from here. He didn't remember the last time he took the time to just sit and have a moment to himself. He continued to sit there with Kakashi's quiet presence next to him, watching the village slowly wake up. Chapter 27. We're going on an adventure. Naruto crossed his arms as he stood in front of the mission assignment desk. It looked bigger from this perspective. Maybe it was the large columns beside it or the windows enveloping the entire wall behind it. It was strange being on this side of the desk. It had been so long since he'd been sent out on a mission. The last was Suna, and that was over a year ago. He understood that they were being more careful about what mission they gave him after that fiasco, and the memory of the large red stamp in his file appeared in his mind once again. There weren't many in Konoha as closely monitored as he was. Would there come a day where he wouldn't leave the village at all? He had known his health would prevent it at some point, but he hadn't considered that he would become tactically important to the security of the village. He hadn't even done it on purpose. They just kept giving him more and more responsibilities as the years went on. He had received a message on his desk that he was to report to the desk for an A rank only a couple of hours ago, and he was curious about what mission they had for him. Kanzuya had arrived shortly before him, and they'd been told that they had to wait for the final members of the team before they could receive their mission scroll. He knew that was the protocol, but it hadn't stopped him from pestering Kataru to get it earlier. The teen had just cringed and ran a hand through his short, black hair sheepishly. The next time he had a hangover, Naruto would not be covering for him. "Sir, you know I can't give you the mission until all team members arrive," he said weakly. Kataru had only been at the desk for a couple of years, and while he was 4 years older than Naruto, he always called him sir. Naruto hadn't been able to break the newer members of the desk of this habit yet. Shikaka thought it was great, and the majority of the Chunin that had been there for the same amount of time or longer than him had taken to joining in, although usually with a grin or a smirk. He thought they were all traitors. "You know, Shinobi older than you calling you sir is never going to get old." Kanzuya grinned at him. "In fact, anyone calling you sir is hilarious. Arai-san Uzumaki-sama is one of the most senior members of the desk and the village administration. He is responsible for much of the day-to-day running of the village and has some measure of authority in almost all of the administrative departments within Konoha." Haruka piped up, the fresh Chunin attempting to stand up for him. Anyone who doesn't defer to him should be written up for insubordination. Kanzuya turned slowly towards him after staring at the woman for a long moment. "Uzumaki-sama?" he asked incredulously. "You're a Tokubetsu Jounin." "I've been trying to get them to stop." Naruto sighed heavily. "They apparently don't care about my rank in the administrative sector." "Uzumaki-sama, you do so much for the village," Haruka insisted. "Your rank doesn't reflect your true capabilities and responsibilities." "Yes, thank you, Haruka. I think he gets the idea," Naruto chided. "Now please concentrate on your work. I don't want any mistakes with dealing with the land of rivers. They're still annoyed at us." She squeaked out a yes, sir, and put her head down. Naruto resisted the urge to facepalm. "This is why I hide in my office nowadays," he muttered beneath his breath. "Since when do you have an office?" asked Kanzuya in surprise. "Since Shikaka got his meddling hands on my schedule," he scowled. He said with all the meetings and paperwork, I needed a space to keep it all organized, and that I shouldn't be overheard discussing confidential matters. He also said that it wasn't appropriate to stay at my desk with the rest of them since I'm technically in charge of most of them, and since my duties now extend beyond the desk. It wasn't appropriate for me to be stationed in that department. "So, wait." Kanzuya was trying to keep up. "Where is your office now? Why didn't you tell me? Who knows about this?" "It's right next to the desk offices," Naruto shrugged. "And it wasn't important. I still come here for work every day. All that's changed is where I sit. I think Shikaka just wanted some privacy when he comes to bother me with stuff not related to work. He even took a nap in there last week." Kanzuya just stared at him, and Naruto shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't that big a deal. Kanzuya had his own office in the hospital. It was part of the whole running the emergency department thing. "I guess it just never clicked how much of a bigwig you're becoming," his friend stated slowly. Like, I hear that you have a lot to do and have lots of meetings and stuff, but it just never occurred to me that you were so high up the food chain. I'm not that high. Naruto threw up his hands in exasperation. I just spend too much time around Chikaka nowadays, and everyone calls him Narasama, since he's a clan head and Jounin commander, and everything, so people think I'm more important than I am. Whatever you say, Uzumaki-sama. He glared at his friend before he was distracted by the signatures approaching the large room. The annoyance melted away as Hana entered the room, closely followed by the Heimeru brothers. "Boys!" she grinned widely. Hana, Naruto took a moment to feel the happiness in their presence, before his brain began to automatically slide the pieces into place. He had the advantage since he knew how the people assigning missions thought, and their process for choosing candidates for A and B ranks. He also knew that there had been discussion in the office about Konoha's current relationship with Kumo. He turned to Kataru. "Really? Could you be more obvious?" "Sir, this was the best team for the mission," the teen replied nervously. "And I'm sure the fact that we're not only the only team to attend a Kumo Chunin exam, but the only ones that made the final had nothing to do with it." "What are you talking about?" Hana asked curiously. "You're escorting Uzumaki-sama to Kumo," Kataru began loudly. He heard Hana whisper Uzumaki-sama behind him, to which Kanzuya whispered back, "I'll tell you later." "Kumo has asked us to send in Fuinjutsu expert to help fortify their dams," Kataru continued a bit more calmly. "The land of lightning has been experiencing severe rainstorms the past few weeks, and it's resulted in flooding for some of their smaller villages. They need seals to make sure the new dams and flood protection doesn't erode or crumble. Why not just draw them up and send them to them?" Hana frowned. "Why send Naruto? Paper seals would come off," Naruto answered her. "They need the seals carved into the stone if they're going to be used long-term. Even then, they'll probably need to be renewed every few years if this kind of weather keeps up, but I can add some protection seals so that it'll stay for at least a decade or so." "Exactly, sir." Kataru was staring at him, his brown eyes wide. "And they can't send me and Kanzuya alone like they normally do with our missions because I'm a security risk and they want me to come back. Kumo has a history of trying to steal Shinobi from this village, so Hana and the Heimer brothers are coming as insurance. Konoha can't afford to lose their resident Fuinjutsu specialist, but they also want to hold this over Kumo's head. It's a calculated risk. Do you want to give us the mission, or are you going to let poor Kataru do his job?" Kanzuya failed to stifle his laugh. Naruto jolted, realizing what he'd done. "I'm so sorry, Kataru," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to step on your toes." "It's okay, sir." Kataru's smile was small but genuine. "It just shows how good you are at this. You already know the mission parameters just from the request." "It's really impressive." Naruto stepped forward to take the mission scroll, bidding the team goodbye as he followed his snickering team out of the large doors. Maybe it would be good to get out of Konoha for a while. Things were still a bit awkward with Ryo, and this way he would definitely be able to give his brother space like he wanted. "Here to report for the next available D rank," Kakashi said cheerfully, eyes smiling at the groans from his genin. "We've got a gardening one." The man at the desk sorted through the stack of files. "Or would you prefer another dog-walking one? Or a painting one?" Kakashi considered the options, although he already knew he was going to go for the dog-walking. Any opportunity to hang with dogs was a good day in his book. He was interrupted before he could tell the Chunin. "No, no way. I'm not doing another D rank. There has got to be something better." Ryo huffed as he crossed his arms, taking a firm stance as he stared Kakashi down. Sakura was nervously glancing between them as Sasuke watched quietly. "Ryo, you know how this works," Kakashi said, maintaining the level of cheer in his voice. "Cute little genin do the D ranks until you're ready for the harder ones." "We are ready." Ryo burst out angrily. "We can all do the jutsu we need to leave the village, and we've been stuck on these shitty missions for months." "HN?" Sasuke added, which Kakashi translated into an agreement with Ryo's sentiments. He looked at his final genin, and Sakura seemed to dither for a moment before she nodded. "Yeah, I think we can do it." Kakashi scanned his team, considering their words. They had changed in the 4 months he had been in charge of them. Sasuke still wore his blue Uchiha t-shirt, but he had switched to Shinobi pants with bandages around the bottom. Ryo, too, had switched to trousers with bandages, but had kept his forest green sweatshirt with the darker colored leaves decorating the hem and sleeves. They both wore their headbands across their foreheads. Sakura had changed the most, abandoning the mid-length red dress she had in the academy. She now wore a much darker, maroon sleeveless dress that came to just below her black biker shorts. It was padded for protection in some areas and was a bit tighter on her frame, so the fabric wouldn't restrict her movements. The biggest change was her much shorter hair. It hung at chin length and was partially kept back by her headband. It was far more practical, and since she had abandoned the diet and perfume, Kakashi was happy to say that she might still make a decent kunoichi. He knew it had everything to do with Kinzuya and nothing to do with him. Kakashi had been too relaxed with them. The laid-back approach wasn't going to work. He had to be better. He hadn't lied when he'd said to Naruto that he felt stuck, that if he tried to do more than the minimum, he would screw everything up and get them killed one day. But he'd realized that approach didn't help anyone either. It hadn't helped Naruto and Ryo when they were younger, and he didn't want to add to the pile of regret that was already weighing him down. He can't be afraid to teach them for fear of failing, because not teaching them was failing before he could even start. He would never measure up to Minato-sensei, but he could do so much more than he's doing now. He had spoken to Gunma since then, and the man had been his savior. He had managed to raise a successful genin team already, and Kakashi needed all the help he could get. Gunma had given him plenty of tips, but had stressed that his team had been nowhere near the norm. They had been almost too independent, but there were still things that Kakashi could use with his own team. The bits that stuck with him in particular were to follow a daily routine, and to always have them learning at least one new thing. It helped him begin to plan out a new training regime for his team to follow, and the more it came together, the better he felt. He was going to be more proactive with their training, and while the fear still lingered at the back of his mind, he was determined to do better. He had spent enough time distancing himself in the past, not only with his team, but everyone around him. Kakashi-sensei? He snapped back to reality as Ryo's violet eyes scrutinized him. He really did look so much like Kushina and nothing like Naruto. They shared their eye shape and nose, but that was it. It had been a strange transition going from a godfather to his sensei. He knew he was still technically his godfather, but it felt different now. Maybe he should take them on a C rank. This could be the first step he needed to really commit to being a better sensei for them. They could handle a few bandits, and once they came back, he could implement his new training schedule. Okay, he nodded. Only if they have a spare one, though. Ryo's eyes widened in shock before he grinned widely, turning back to the desk Chunin expectantly. The young Chunin shuffled the papers in his hands, scanning through them. He turned to his neighbor to ask, and Haru pulled out a scroll from her pile, handing it over with here, Ko. We have a C-rank escort mission, Ko offered. It's to escort a bridge builder by the name of Tazuna back to his home in the land of waves and protect him until the completion of the bridge. Low risk. Maybe some bandits, but pretty straightforward for a first C-rank. We'll take it, Ryo said hurriedly before he looked back at Kakashi. We will, he agreed. Okay, can someone call Tazuna-san in? Only seconds later, an old man stumbled into the room and Kakashi held his breath as the stench of alcohol invaded his sensitive nose. It was as bad as some of the bars, and that was saying something. The man glanced around the room blearily before his eyes landed on them. Why are there kids here? He slurred. Where's my escort? Tazuna-san. Kakashi stepped forward before one of his team could open their mouths. I am Hatake Kakashi, and this is Team 7. We will be protecting you during this mission. He turned to his genin to see Ryo fuming and Sasuke not far behind him. The Uchiha's face twisted up into a deep scowl. Sakura wasn't angry, but she certainly wasn't happy. Go home and pack for a month-long mission, he ordered. Remember you have to carry whatever you bring, and Ryo, drop Momo off with the Inuzuka kennels, since your brothers are away. Meet me at the front gates in an hour. Naruto and Kazuya had left a week ago on a mission of their own, so Kakashi hadn't had a chance to speak to the redhead since their talk on the Hokage mountain. He knew things were still strained between the two Uzumakis, but he didn't know the extent of it. The genin scattered before Tazuna could say something else, and he turned to the man. "I'll give you an hour to sober up a bit," he drawled. "Excuse me?" Tazuna snapped. "We're going to do our best to protect you and complete the mission," Kakashi began, training his eye on Tazuna's face intently. "However, I won't have my genin scraping you off the road, because you can't walk in a straight line." He left the man spluttering as he shunshined away. Naruto slogged his way to the village, regretting his choice of mission attire. The warnings of rainstorms had not been exaggerated, and Naruto feared that he would never be dry again. His shinobi pants were soaked through, and the mesh undershirt did nothing to protect him from the elements. As practical as his black crop top was for accessing the storage seals on his ribs and abdomen, it was terrible for retaining heat. He was glad he had left his orange jacket at home, but the loose black jumper he'd thrown on the minute they crossed the border stuck uncomfortably to his skin. Kazuya wasn't faring much better in his tight black turtleneck, and Hana's Chunin vest showed the goosebumps that ran the entire length of her arms. He didn't envy the bike shorts she wore either. The Haimaru brothers seemed to have shrunk in size as their fur was plastered to their bodies. They had the gray, waterproof ponchos that had worked for a time, but the sheer volume of water falling from the sky had rendered them useless. They all wore them, but Naruto knew that everything beneath was soaked regardless. "Are you guys trying to become the new land of water?" Hana said grumpily, trying to pull her hood further over her head. Their escort laughed, throwing a sharp-toothed grin back at them. Her blonde hair was plastered to her face, and she seemed to escape the air of gloom that surrounded his team. "We always get pretty bad thunderstorms this time of year," Niyujito shrugged, her steps light. "It's just particularly bad this year, and some of the villages weren't prepared for the flooding. I would have thought someone who liked fire techniques so much would be miserable in this kind of weather." Kazuya huffed. "I grew up with it." Yujito's gaze was sharp. They continued walking in silence for a while, and Naruto tried not to keep glancing at the Kimonin. The demonic chakra felt so similar to Ryo's, but it also didn't. It felt much warmer, and there was something he could sense that made it slightly different to the Kyuubi and the Ichibi. He didn't know which tailed beast she had sealed inside her, and he wouldn't know how to tell. Shikaku also felt different, but he still wasn't able to pinpoint why. "We're here if you're quite finished staring at me." Naruto held up his hands in surrender as she glared at him. He broke her gaze to take in his surroundings, and something uncomfortable settled into his gut at the sight of the destruction. The rain was still falling, but most of the flooding had already subsided. He watched a villager struggle to walk in the deep mud, almost dropping the basket in her arms as she became briefly stuck in the shin-deep dirt. The ground was churned up no doubt by others trying to walk around, and there were still puddles all over the place. The houses he could see were damaged. One was missing an entire wall. Another's roof now lay on the ground beside it, and the one closest to him was barely hanging on to the wall it had left. This area was one of the worst hit, Yujito said quietly. "It's never usually this bad, but they get some sort of flooding every year. The damage built up, so when the storm hit, it just took everything with it." "What's going to happen to them now?" Hana asked, subdued. "They'll be relocated to Kumo for now," Yujito explained. "We have emergency shelters for this kind of thing. Once the season is over, they'll come back and rebuild before next year. Why come back if this is just going to keep happening? This is their home." Yujito shrugged. "And with Uzumaki seals, we can prevent something on this scale from happening again. When they return and rebuild, it'll have a level of protection they've never had before. Why not get someone to write these seals before?" Kazuya watched the cat stranded on a rock. Why wait until now? Yujito kept silent for a moment. "Kumo has never had an Fuinjutsu expert," she said reluctantly, the words seeming to pain her to say. "Every shinobi can write an explosive tag or storage seal, but the kind of level we need for this is hard to find. Suna had one or two, but not ones that were of any use." "What about Jiraiya and the Yondaime, though?" Naruto pointed out. They're better than me and could have helped years ago. We only got a peace treaty with Konoha 8 years ago, and things haven't exactly been peaceful between us even then, Yujito sighed. Why ask now then? Hana demanded. You guys came to the Chunin exam 5 years ago, she replied. It was a sign that you trusted us enough not to just outright murder you the moment you stepped into the village. When Reikitsama saw Uzumaki's sealing abilities, he wanted to ask you then, but we had to wait until you improved a bit more. After what happened in Suna, we decided to go for it, although it took us a while to convince the council that we could trust Konoha. At their dubious looks, she amended her statement. That we could be safe in the assumption that Konoha wouldn't just try to sabotage us, she admitted. I don't think there will ever be trust. It's the same on our end anyway. Kanzuya agreed easily. Yujito led them away and towards the walls that seemed out of place amongst the sodden remains of the village. They were in good condition and built high and thick from smooth gray stone. We have shinobi that are going ahead of us to rebuild these, said Yujito. There are some at the nearby river that also need to be sealed, but these are the last line of defense. It shields the village against the overflow from the river and diverts it around the village. The ones at the river should mean that these don't get used, but the river ones crumble a lot quicker. The village will still get flooding from the rain, but this prevents most of the damage. Naruto bent down to examine the base of the wall. The rain was lightening up a bit and, while still cold, was much easier to deal with. How far down do the walls go? As deep as we can make it, Yujito answered. He ran his hands up the wall and looked along, trying to judge the length. He might need a few seals. Maybe he can add a linking component, so he could make sure that there were no parts uncovered. It would add a layer of complexity, but better safe than sorry. And it's mainly earth and stone? Yeah, she answered, slightly frustrated. Why does all this matter? I need to know what it is, so I can use the right seal, he answered absently, still examining the wall. I wouldn't use the same seal to fortify the weak points as I would to prevent water damage. He didn't wait for her response. Different materials don't respond to water in the same way. He stood, pushing his hood back as the rain became a soft mist. It depends on how much space there is in the material for the water to sink into or how hydrophobic it is. The seal I'm using will be hydrophobic in nature, but I need to know the material, so I don't mess with the structure itself while the seal is active. He finally looked at his guide's face, and there was no comprehension on her face. He frowned and looked over to Kanzuya and Hana, but they had the same look. I guess this is why we needed an expert, Yujito said slowly. None of our people ever mentioned anything about this. I mean, you can slap a water-repelling seal on and it would work, Naruto shrugged. It just wouldn't work as well as a tailored one, and the seal really needs to be ingrained into the material rather than using sealing paper. And you can do this? Yep, Naruto grinned. Give me a while to figure out the components and design. I have a base already drawn up, but I need to tweak it. Wait, I thought you were going to do it now, Yujito challenged. Why the delay? Naruto ignored her as he picked a rock nearby to settle on. He whipped out his notebook from the storage seal on his left rib and took out a brush to start working on it. He tried to filter out the conversation happening nearby. Trust us, this is still faster than anyone else you could have got, reassured Kanzuya. There aren't many people who can just create a seal on the spot. I tried once, and the training ground was never the same after that. That was you. Hana demanded. The betting pool on who did it has been going round for years. Oh, who won? No idea, but I know you aren't on the list. I think Genma-sensei had sealing accident, though, but he was sure it was Naruto. Nice. As interesting as this is, if you could go away and leave me to work on this, Naruto drawled, raising an eyebrow at them. I'd like to get this done before the next shower. The pair sheepishly apologized before they wandered away, although they stayed in his line of sight. Yujito was throwing them strange looks before she crept closer, eyeing the pages in his hands. Naruto looked back down and added a couple of lines. He really did need to get this done. He still had another 5 villages after this. Ryo walked in front of the group with Sasuke, the drunken bridge builder behind them, and Kakashi-sensei, and Sakura following up the rear. Ryo had been at the back to begin with, but he couldn't stand the smell. The old man was oozing booze and Ryo hated it, the strong stench irritating his nose to the point of pain. He didn't know how Kakashi-sensei was coping. Despite the less than desirable company, he was happy to be out of the village. He had never left Konoha before, and he was excited to finally do something other than painting fences or chasing cats. When he had asked Kakashi-sensei for a better mission, he hadn't expected to succeed. Kakashi-sensei had been different in the past 2 weeks. He was still late with his nose in his orange book, but the training exercises he set them had been much harder, and Ryo felt like he was finally pushing them. Another bonus of being out of the village was avoiding the risk of interacting with Nissan. They had talked when Nissan had come back home after their argument, but things had still been tense and weird since then. He could see Nissan trying to give him space and holding himself back from offering help when Ryo complained about things, and he was grateful that his brother was trying. It did feel good to be independent and to be able to figure things out for himself without his brother nagging at him to do this or that or butting in. It did result in awkward silences, as Nissan didn't speak at all sometimes. He never asked how his day was going anymore or what they did at training. He always asked Sasuke, and Ryo had to stop himself from adding his own commentary. He couldn't exactly ask for space and then be the one to break it. He was being given what he asked for, but for some reason it wasn't as great as Ryo imagined it would be. There was distance now, and although Ryo knew he was the one to put it there, he couldn't help but feel annoyed at Nissan. Surely there was a way to give him his space without making him feel like Nissan was avoiding him. He didn't like the way things had turned out. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Kakashi-sensei, are there no shinobi in the land of waves? Sakura spoke up. There used to be, he answered easily. The Uzumaki used to run the shinobi village Izushio decades ago, and although they were based in the land of whirlpools, they covered the land of waves too. Wait, Uzumaki? Ryo interrupted. Kakashi-sensei nodded. Yeah, the Uzumaki clan was an old clan allied with Konoha. They were renowned for their fuinjutsu and longevity. You could tell someone was an Uzumaki a mile away from their red hair. That sounds like Naruto, Sasuke said quietly. Yeah, he really takes after them despite being born after the clan's destruction. You probably have more in common with your mother, Ryo, but he's obviously an Uzumaki. And I'm not, Ryo muttered. You have her eyes and her joy. Kakashi smiled. You may not have the red hair and fuinjutsu, but that doesn't make you less of an Uzumaki. You've certainly got the energy they were also known for. Ryo accepted his words despite the doubt that was lingering. It was strange to hear about a whole clan of people who died before he even existed. He knew the general record of events from his history lessons. His mother must have been alive when Izushio fell. He wondered how she must have felt. They were known for longevity. Sakura added, so we're going to be stuck with Ryo and Naruto for much longer than necessary. Sasuke deadpanned, although Ryo could see the amusement in his eyes. Wonderful. I'm going to outlive you at least, he shot back. Before his friend could retort, Ryo noticed that they were walking up to a puddle. It seemed a bit out of place in the middle of the bone-dry road, and years of ambushes from Nissan and Kazune had taught him to be vigilant. He looked to the side to see that Sasuke had noticed the same thing he did. He slowed down, waving at Tazuna and Sakura to stop. They had just stopped walking when two figures burst out of the puddle. Ryo ducked as chains whipped towards him. As they passed over him, Ryo spun around to check on his teammates. Sasuke had managed to deflect the chain, and Sakura had grabbed Tazuna and hit the deck. The chain surrounded Kakashi-sensei, and as they were pulled taut, blood splattered the ground around him, and his body was shredded into large, bloody chunks. They hit the ground with a dull thud, and Ryo's stomach churned at the sight. Ryo couldn't look away from the remains of his godfather, horror and anger warring within him the longer he stared. The concept that he was dead just wouldn't register. It was Kashi can't die. An absent thought passed through his mind that he couldn't smell any blood, but he was too upset to focus on that detail. He turned furious eyes on the enemy Nin, Sasuke taking a defensive stance next to him. He tore several kunai out of the pouch on his thigh and threw it in an arc towards the men. He managed to snag parts of their chains and nail them to the tree just beside the road. The enemy Nin were pulled forward as the chain was attached to each of their hands, and as they tried to free themselves, Sasuke took action. He leapt into the air, landing with one foot in each of their faces. The force of his kick detached the chains from them, and they were shoved in opposite directions. Ryo went after one as Sasuke launched himself after the other in the corner of his eye. The man swiped at him with his massive claws, and Ryo dropped to the ground, trying to swipe the man's legs out from under him. The enemy jumped, and Ryo rolled backwards as the man dug his claws into the place where he'd just been. Ryo flung himself forward and grabbed the man's arm with both hands, pulling with all his strength to tear it out of the ground and fling the man away. The man bounced once before he landed on his feet, glaring harshly at Ryo. Ryo took off towards him, trying to limit the man's ability to think and react. It didn't work, and Ryo narrowly dodged a punch that would have taken a chunk out of his shoulder. He responded with his own hit, and he barely managed to hit the man's throat. The man coughed and spluttered, the spit flying from his mouth, and Ryo threw another jab to the same spot, dropping the man to his knees as he struggled to breathe. Ryo made sure to kick the man in the face as hard as he could, and he dropped like a stone, the blood from his nose running into the grass. He heaved a breath in as he stared down at the man. Kazune had taught him that, to go for the most vulnerable points on the human body. It had been several long afternoons with Kazune's anatomy textbook, and it wasn't until now that Ryo found himself appreciating those lessons. Nisen had taught him how to throw that jab. He looked around to see Sasuke standing over his own opponent, Sakura still hovering protectively over Tazuna. His eyes were drawn back to Kashi's remains. He could only see scattered pieces of wood, and the blood had vanished. He opened his mouth but was interrupted by a puff of smoke, his teacher reappearing with a cheerful yo. Ryo took in the sight for a long moment before he stomped over to his godfather, punching the man hard in the stomach. "You are never, ever allowed to do that again," he yelled, swallowing the lump that was rising in his throat. "You hear me, Kashi? If you ever make me think you're dead, I'll tell Nisen." He didn't want to use his brother as a threat, but it was the most effective one he could think of right at this moment. Kashi barely reacted to the blow, but his features softened. "My bad, Ryo-chan," he said, ruffling his hair. "I just wanted to see how you guys would cope on your own. You were amazing." Kashi then turned to face Tazuna, the builder suddenly looking very nervous. "Now then, Tazuna-san," he said with fake politeness, "would you care to explain why Shinobi had just tried to kill you? I'm sure you know that is at least a B rank, and yet I recall that this mission is a C rank. Strange, yes?" Tazuna gulped before he caved, spilling the story of Gato and his iron grip on their home. Naruto was finally released from the grip of the gate guards, walking over to meet up with the rest of his team. "You know, this is the third time we've come to Kumo this week," Kanzuya grumbled, glaring at the guards. "You'd think they'd expedite the searches a bit. You're from Konoha?" Yujito shrugged. "It doesn't matter how many times you come here. They're still going to be cautious." Naruto understood where she was coming from, but it didn't make it any less annoying. They always took the longest with him due to all the storage seals he had on him. He followed the Kumo Nin as she spoke to Hana, Kanzuya trudging along beside him. It had taken longer than anticipated to perfect the seal, and he'd only managed to finish the one village. They were staying in Kumo, so they'd been forced to return for the night with plans to set off for the next one in the early morning. He'd reassured their guard/guide that process would be much faster now he'd figured it all out. He was particularly proud of this one. He would say it was one of his finest, and he knew by the time he'd finished them all he would be able to do it with his eyes closed. The only issue he had thought of with it was maintenance. He wouldn't be around when these seals would need renewed. Annual maintenance would extend the need for renewal for a decade or two, but he couldn't come back once a year just for that. What would Kyumo do once he passed? There were no budding Fuinjutsu experts in Konoha. Tenten was doing well, but she had no interest beyond what she could apply to her weapons. Naruto wanted this to be a long-term solution. What are you thinking about? Kanzuya nudged him. Not much, he shrugged. Just that we may never be dry again. How are you doing with that? Kanzuya prompted, his pink eyes scanning Naruto carefully. How's your chest doing? I'm fine, Kaz. Naruto rolled his eyes. I promised I would tell you if I got bad. At the end of this mission, it's probably going to be a different story, but for right now, I am fine. Okay, dropping it. Kanzuya held up his hands in surrender. What do you think about that situation, then? Naruto followed his gaze to the women walking just in front of them. Their heads were bowed together slightly, and he could see a smile dancing on Hana's face. She was more relaxed than he would have thought in an enemy village. The Haimuru brothers trotted along beside her, and they were much more alert. What situation? He asked, confused. It's a good thing they're getting along. Oh, they're getting along all right. Kanzuya huffed in amusement. Naruto frowned. He was missing something. Kanzuya stared at him for a long moment before he rolled his eyes. You are hopeless. You know that? I feel bad for your future partner. Whoever they turn out to be. Naruto was about to retort when he felt a signature enter his range. He stopped in the middle of the yellow path that ran through the village and turned his head in its direction. Kyumo had 2 Jinchuriki. Why didn't he sense this one during the Chunin exams? Naruto? He snapped his eyes back to his team, who had also stopped. Yujito had narrowed her eyes at him. Sorry, it's nothing. I just thought I saw something, he said sheepishly. He was pretty sure Kyumo didn't know about his sensing abilities, and he wanted to try and keep it that way. It was bad enough that they knew about his Fuinjutsu. He didn't want to imagine how they would act if they found out. Probably try to kidnap him like they had a tendency to do. The signature moved, and Naruto could feel it directly in front of them. He began to walk at a brisk pace towards it, passing Yujito and Hana, and missing the looks his teammates shared behind him. He finally spotted a large man in the near distance, gesturing exaggeratedly as 2 kids followed behind him. As they drew closer, Naruto took in the man's appearance. He was tall and built solidly with large muscles bulging across his dark skin. Blonde dreadlocks were held back by a white kimono hide, which matched the long white scarf around his neck and the white, sleeveless body armor that had only one shoulder strap. A thick red rope wrapped around his waist, and it coordinated with the red accents on his white bracers and shin guards. He had a blue tattoo on his bare shoulder, and 2 red-hilted swords were attached to his back. The demonic chakra within him was closer to Ryo's and Yujito's, but there was a sense of calm about it that he hadn't felt before. It was almost the opposite of Shikaka's chaotic, roiling energy. As they drew even closer, the group having stopped in the middle of the street, he could see the long-suffering looks on the faces of what he assumed were genin. They reminded him of Niji and Tenten whenever Guy went on one of his youth rants. The white-haired boy looked downright depressed, and the red-headed girl was one word away from stabbing her sensei. Will this rain ever stop? It's dampening my style. Bakayaro, Kanayaro. The white-haired boy actually groaned out loud before he spotted Naruto's group approaching. Yujito-sama. The large man stopped yelling and lugged over, black sunglasses hiding his eyes. Yo, Yujito! He held out his hands in a strange pose. What is up, cool cat? Yujito rolled her eyes, her expression fond. I'm fine, B-sama, she answered respectfully. How did your training go today? My students are so good, yo. Their strength is solid. My hopes are high. He tilted his head. Who are these tuneless geezers? This is the Fuinjutsu expert from Konoha. Yujito gestured to Naruto. These are his escorts, and I'm guiding them around. So, we're finally getting the flood protection seals. The girl asked eagerly. Yup. Naruto grinned despite the wary looks they were still shooting at him. Finished it today, so just gotta slap them on. Aren't you a bit young to be an expert? The boy asked, his dark eyes watching him carefully. Oh, moi. B yelled. That's not cool. Nah, it's fine. Naruto waved a hand dismissively. You would not believe how many people ask the same question. He slipped a hand under his poncho, unsealing the papers from the storage seal on his ribs. Taking it out, he offered it to the genin. Wanna see? Omoy hesitated, so the girl snatched it out of his hands, Omoy shooting an annoyed Karui at her. He peered over her shoulder to look at the scribbles that Naruto had drawn that day. Are you interested in sealing? Naruto asked nonchalantly. The genin didn't answer him, but he stepped in. Omoy is more focused on his lightning jutsu, Bakayaro. Kanayaro, I caught him with some sealing books once, and it was totally his style. It's not as if we have someone that can teach him, though, Yujito added. Naruto's self-taught, Kanzuya announced with a gleeful look in his eyes. He had the audacity to dodge the sharp elbow that Naruto tried to jab into his side. Really? The two Kyumo-jounin stared at him. Yeah, Naruto admitted. There's been a lot of ruined furniture in the process, and trees, and one table at the library. Naruto subscribes to the trial and error method of learning. Anyway, Naruto said loudly, hoping to get back on topic. If you're free tomorrow, I can take you two with us to the villages, and I can teach you how to apply and maintain the seals yourselves. That way I don't have to keep coming back, and Kyumo will have someone who knows how they work. This drew a mixture of shocked and confused looks his way. He knew it was a bit unorthodox to give away a potential leverage over a rival village, but he knew this was the right thing to do. It was now just a matter of convincing Kyumo that he was being genuine, and it wasn't some convoluted scheme to undermine them. This should be fun. Chapter 28. This adventure is not going the way we imagined. Ryo hopped out of the wooden boat, watching the tree line carefully as Sakura and Tazuna exited the boat behind him. It was hard to see much through the thick white fog that extended from the water. He took a deep breath, the cold, damp air filling his lungs. He'd never been on a boat before, and the sensation had been strange. The grass beneath his feet still felt like it was moving. The boat trip had given him the opportunity to see what was already built of Tazuna's bridge. It was a lot bigger than he'd been expecting. It might take forever to finish. Ryo, you take point, Kakashi ordered. Tell me if you can smell or hear anything unusual. Sasuke and Sakura, you keep close to Tazuna. If anything happens, grab him and get a safe distance. I'll follow up the rear. Ryo nodded as Sasuke let out a HN and Sakura chirped, yes, sensei. He began to walk and entered the forest, pushing some chakra to his ears. It was a trick that Sumba-chan had taught him a while ago. His senses were already more sensitive than the average shinobi. Kazune always said that he had spent too much time around the Inuzuka when he was younger. He did share more traits with them than a non-Inuzuka should. The early morning was quiet, and even as they walked further and further away from the shoreline, the air remained brisk and damp. He could hear the leaves rustling above them in the gentle breeze, and the ground was finally starting to feel steady. The scent of this forest was different to the ones back in Konoha. He didn't expect that. He didn't think trees and bushes would be different in another country, but he supposed it should have been obvious that they would be. His ear twitched and his head snapped to the right, his eyes trained on a bush. He took a deep sniff of the air. There was something there. Ryo. He watched the white rabbit bounce into view, his hackles lowering. Its little nose twitched and Ryo met its dark eyes, something unsettling itching at the back of his brain. Why was there a white rabbit here? It stood out from the motley surroundings, which he was pretty sure wasn't a great survival mechanism. He caught a new scent on the next gust of wind. An alarm shot through him, his heart beginning to beat like a hummingbird as all senses went on high alert. Kashi-sensei. Everyone duck now. Ryo threw himself to the ground as a massive silver sword flew overhead, right where his head would have been. He glanced behind him to see that everyone else had managed to get down. The sword landed with a thud into one of the trees. The blade sunk over halfway through the trunk. His eyes widened as a man dropped onto the still quivering handle. The smell of blood began to clog up his nose despite the fact he couldn't see any in the vicinity. The man was dressed pretty plainly. Ryo scanned his baggy black trousers and tight black vest carefully to try and find the source of the smell. His lower face and neck were covered up just like Kakashi, but by worn, not quite white bandages, and his attire was lopsided on his head. Ryo squinted as he tried to remember which village had that symbol. Kiri, I want you to take to Zuna and get as far away from here as you can. Three heads snapped towards their teacher. Kashi-sensei? Ryo asked hesitantly, his eyes never leaving the enemy Nin. This is serious. Kakashi replied gravely. That man is Momochi Zabuza. He's A rank in the bingo book. He reached a hand up to push his forehead protector up, a long vertical scar running through his closed eye. He opened it, and Ryo stared at the red iris. He had only seen it once before, when he was much younger. He had pestered his godfather until he'd caved and revealed it to him. I'm honored, Sharingan no Kakashi, that you would give your all from the first move. The man folded his arms. You are a dangerous opponent yourself. It would be a testament to my skill if I were the one to take you out. Sharingan, he heard Sasuke matter, his teammate staring at Kakashi like he had never seen him before. Why the fuck does he have a Sharingan? Not the time, Sasuke. Ryo shot back, and Sasuke switched his furious glare onto him. He'll tell you the story when someone isn't trying to murder us. Murder? Sakura whispered. Suedun. Kirigakure no Jutsu. A thick cloud of mist rolled towards him from where Ryo could smell water. He scrambled to stand beside Tazuna, making sure his teammates had joined him to form a triangle around their client. I'm going to have my hands full with this guy, so it's up to you three to protect Tazuna, Kakashi said firmly. Laughter echoed around them. You're only delaying the inevitable. Ryo flinched hard as Zabuza suddenly appeared in the middle of their formation. He swung the massive sword at them, and Ryo clumsily pulled a kunai from his pouch in an attempted defense. He hadn't even heard Zabuza extract the sword from the tree. Kakashi lunged from behind him and drove his own kunai into the man's guts. Ryo let out a harsh breath as the man dissolved into a puddle, the water sinking into the grass beneath them. It caught in his throat as he watched Zabuza reappear behind Kakashi, slashing straight through his torso. Sakura let out a short scream, but before Ryo could react, his teacher dissolved into water, exactly like the enemy had moments earlier. I suppose it would have been too simple for you to fall for my decoy, Zabuza growled. I have to say I'm impressed by Sharingan no Kakashi so far, though. To think that you would copy my water clone so quickly and to use it to such effect. You are truly a worthy opponent. Kakashi appeared behind Zabuza, and Ryo allowed himself to hope. It's over, Momochi Zabuza, he mocked. Your plan failed. Bold of you to assume that was the plan. The words had barely registered when Zabuza proceeded to collapse into a puddle, a dark shape emerging from the mist behind their teacher. Ryo tried to call out a warning, but Zabuza had grabbed his arm, flinging him in the direction of the lake. Kaka-sensei! Sakura called out desperately. Sasuke remained silent, but Ryo could see that his fists were shaking. He looked down to see that his were doing the same. His gaze snapped back to the lake as he saw Kakashi break the surface of the water from where he had been thrown in. Zabuza popped up next to him, and although Ryo couldn't see his face, he could imagine the wicked grin the man must be wearing. Suedun. Suiro no Jutsu. Water swirled around the pair until Kakashi was trapped in a sphere of liquid, his form distorted and blurred. Zabuza's arm was stuck inside it as the man sent out another clone that began to make its way towards them. Ryo glanced at Kakashi, his teacher's eyes intense in a way Ryo had never seen before. Run. The thought of doing just that sent a wave of unease through Ryo. Was he just supposed to leave his godfather here, at the mercy of someone they'd already been told was dangerous? He was distracted by Sasuke stepping forward. We're not running. He pointed a kunai at their teacher. I need answers about that eye of yours. Ryo took a deep breath, collecting himself. He set his shoulders and planted his feet, facing the enemy with a scowl. Yeah, Kashi-sensei. I thought you'd know us better than that. He ran through his options. If they could just get Kakashi free, they would stand a chance. He honestly didn't know if they could beat the clone, so they would just have to avoid it as much as possible. They needed a decoy. Thoughts whirling around his head, he snatched a scroll from his backpack, summoning the massive Fuma Shuriken that had been stored inside. He shoved it at Sasuke. Remember when Nissan and Kazune made us play Capture the Flag? Sasuke stared back at him for a moment before it clicked. He grabbed the Fuma Shuriken from Ryo and nodded. Ryo immediately summoned a clone, using the smoke from the jutsu to cover his henge. Sasuke proceeded to throw the Fuma Shuriken right at the water clone. The clone laughed as he easily caught the projectile. Is the best Konoha can do? These are the genin produced from the strongest village. He abruptly stopped laughing as a second Fuma Shuriken appeared in the shadow of the first and continued sailing past him towards the real Zabuza. It missed, but as he got behind the enemy Nin, Ryo changed back, throwing a kunai towards a man. Zabuza was forced to let go of the water prison with a curse, and as Ryo hit the water, he heard the explosive tag go off. He broke through the surface of the lake to see the smoke lingering from the explosion, and grinned as he spotted a fuming, lightly charred Zabuza. He felt someone pick him up by his collar, and looked over at Kakashi. "You guys did good," he eye-smiled. "Now leave the rest of me." He was carried back to the shore as the real Kakashi faced off against Zabuza in the middle of the lake. The Kakashi clone dissolved back into water as Ryo was set down beside his teammates. "I don't remember the explosive tag being part of the plan." Sasuke raised an eyebrow at him. "Explosive tags should always be part of the plan," Ryo beamed, shaking from the adrenaline. Just the kunai didn't seem like it would be enough. They were distracted by the commotion on the lake. Ryo's mouth dropped open slightly as he watched two massive water dragons rise from the lake, facing off against each other. They collided, and Ryo was forced to cover his eyes as a torrent of water was flung towards them. He couldn't see much between the mist and the residual water from the techniques colliding. He heard something and whipped around, seeing Kakashi standing over Zabuza's unconscious body on the shore. Before his teacher could do anything further, a needle came from above them, hitting Zabuza's neck. Ryo watched his breathing stop as a hunter Nin with long brown hair and a white mask dropped down to stand beside the body. "Thank you for your assistance," the Nin said, hauling Zabuza up onto his shoulder. "I have been hunting this man for a long time. I shall take him back to Kirigakure." Before any of them could respond, the Nin disappeared with Zabuza's body. Something niggled at the back of Ryo's brain at the interaction, but he dismissed it. He had enough to think about right now. They had barely been gone a moment before Kakashi crumpled, hitting the ground with a wet thud. Ryo scrambled forward, sliding in on his knees to hover over his godfather, exhausted but still breathing. He leaned back onto his heels as he glanced over to Tazuna. "Is your house far?" The man fumbled for a moment, still in shock. "And no, I can take you there." Ryo nodded, the tiredness beginning to hit him now. He gestured to Sasuke, and the other boy joined him on the ground. He grabbed one arm as Sasuke gripped the other, and they hauled Kakashi up. Ryo secured his teacher's arm around him. "We may be a bit over our heads with this one," Ryo admitted quietly. He had never imagined when they had agreed to follow through with the mission that it would turn out like this. "We're here," Sasuke said just as quietly. "We'll just have to deal with it." Ryo sighed as he adjusted Kakashi's weight across his shoulders. A thought occurred to him as they began to drag his teacher into the trees. "If we don't die here, Nissan is going to kill us." Naruto shot an apologetic look towards his teammates as he continued extracting weapons from his person. He didn't think he'd manage to store this much, but he had a tendency to seal stuff and forget about it. They were required to remove all weapons before they were allowed in front of the rakeage, and they were being much more thorough than the gate guards had been. He dropped a pack of Senbon onto the large pile at his feet, smiling sheepishly at the scowling Jounin in front of him. "Is that everything?" Naruto thought for a moment before he jumped, quickly reaching into the bandages wrapped around his shins and pulling out a wad of seals. He threw them onto the pile as he reached into the other leg and extracted several long daggers. He handed them over and stood straight once again. The Jounin narrowed his eyes at him, and Naruto reached into a hidden crevice of his bracer, pulling out a final tiny kunai. He laughed nervously. I think that's everything. He joined everyone in looking at the pile of kunai, sealing supplies, snacks, shuriken, water bottles, samban, daggers, soldier pills, and seals. It reached his hip in height, and Naruto could not remember storing half the stuff. It had taken a solid 20 minutes to get it all out. 17 minutes longer than it had taken Kazuya and Hana. Was he a hoarder? Could someone be a hoarder if they didn't know they were doing it? It was going to be a nightmare to get it all back in place. Fucking hell, AK-chan. Kazuya stared at him. Let's go, Yujito ordered, although she was also looking at him incredulously. Naruto followed her through the doors and up the winding stone steps. They reached the highest level, and Yujito paused before a massive set of doors, pushing them open and striding forward. Naruto followed a bit slower and watched her kneel before a large dark-skinned man. He was lounging on a weathered red sofa, and Naruto's gaze was caught by all the workout gear spread out over the blue carpet. The room was lit by the expanse of windows that replaced the walls, and he could see the entirety of Kyumo from here. He supposed that was the point. Reikid-sama, I brought you the Fuinjutsu expert from Konoha and his escorts. The man was so different from their own leader. The man was shirtless, leaving his massive, bulging muscles out for all to see. Thick gold bracers matched his garish, wide belt, and his stern features were only highlighted by the tiny blonde mustache and goatee he sported. Naruto met his dark, considering gaze before he felt his head being shoved down. Thank you for your generous hospitality, Reikijima, Kazuya announced respectfully. We hope our presence here strengthens the bond between our villages and offers some measure of security for your citizens. There was a heavy silence. So you're the silver tongue of the bunch, the Reikij, his deep voice echoing around the large room. I have no patience for your kind, so do not speak again. Have the Fuinjutsu expert approach. Naruto made it a point to not look at Kazuya's taken-aback expression as he stepped forward. The Reikij's gaze focused on him, and Naruto planted his feet, meeting the weight with his own stare. An Uzumaki? Naruto couldn't read the man's expression. Yes. The Reikij fell silent for a moment before he lounged further into the couch cushions. He seemed a bit quiet for his size. Even Yujito was sending the main strange looks from her place beside him. I am told that you wish to teach our genin these seals of yours. Naruto took that as permission to explain. I want to take them with me as I continue placing the seals around the other villages. Once placed, they will last several years, but they will erode. That can be prevented by annual maintenance, and you cannot rely on me to return every year to do so. It would be better for the country, in the long run, if I taught you how to do it. It can then be passed down so disasters like these can be stopped before they happen. And why would you do this? Konoha has never favored Kyumo before, and I highly doubt your Hokage would change his mind so easily. This isn't Hokage-sama's decision, Naruto said firmly. It's mine. You haven't answered why. What will you demand from us? Naruto frowned. I'm not doing this to gain favor or anything like that. It's civilians that are suffering, whose homes are being destroyed. Their lives should not be used as leverage. I understand that our villages have been hostile in the past, but that is a matter between shinobi. I want to help the civilians of the Land of Lightning, not Kyumo. He held his head high. The seal is non-combative. It is designed for one purpose and one purpose only, although if anyone could figure out a way to use it in battle, it would be Kyumo. He trailed off, speaking mostly to himself by the end. The Reikij held his gaze for a moment longer. You remind me of someone I once knew from Konoha, he said. He had the same eyes and the same intent behind them. Naruto tried not to freeze. It was inevitable that someone outside the village would draw connections between him and the Yondaime. He had been fortunate so far that no one had looked into it further. I believe actions and strength determine everything we do. The Reikij stood, the couch creaking under his large frame. I do not have time for weakness, and while your escorts fall short, I will give you a chance to prove yourself." He waved a hand over his shoulder as he walked over to stare out of one of the windows. Teach bees Genin, and ensure Kumo never has to depend on Konoha again. Fail to back up your actions, and Konoha will lose their Fuinjutsu expert. Naruto glared at the man shortly before he was shoved out the door by Yujito. Kanzuya and Hana were already outside, and his friend looked ready to hit him. "What the fuck was that, Naruto?" Kanzuya hissed. "That seal is the only leverage we have for Kumo not to kidnap us and stick us in some basement somewhere. The minute you hand it over, they're going to kill us anyway. That or take you for your sensing and Fuinjutsu." He froze, the anger draining from his pink gaze as he turned to look at an unimpressed Yujito. "No offense," he added. Yujito narrowed her eyes at him. "Sensing?" Naruto didn't resist the urge to face-bomb. Ryo followed his sensei through the trees, the pace slow due to Kakashi's makeshift crutches. He watched him carefully as the man limped along. If Kazune was here, there was no way Kakashi would be up and about already. He paused. If Kazune was here, Kakashi would be healed already. He was still pretty sure his godfather would have been forced on bed rest. He had woken up a couple hours ago and had explained exactly who Zabuza was. Ryo felt sick at the thought of massacring his entire graduating class, and he felt more grateful than usual to have been born in Konoha. He just couldn't imagine going through with something like that. Did he not have friends in that class? People he cared about enough to curb the violence? His teacher had then gone on to point out the reason that Ro had felt something off about the Hunter Nin. They normally destroy their target's body on the spot, sometimes taking the head as proof. This Hunter Nin had taken Zabuza with him. Kakashi said it was likely to be an accomplice of Zabuza, especially since the guy had used Senbon, not usually a weapon associated with Hunter Nin. Zabuza was going to be back, and they would have to fight him off all over again. Sasuke had also managed to corner the man into spilling how he'd gotten his Sharingan. Ryo already knew the story, but it was something that Kakashi didn't like to talk about. He was surprised he'd told Sasuke anything, although he'd had to take Sakura downstairs, so she didn't overhear. Kakashi finally stopped in the middle of a clearing and turned to face them. Trees surrounded them on all sides, and there was a collection of dark green bushes over to the side, neighboring a murky-looking pond. "In light of the situation, I'm going to move your new training regime forward. I was going to start it after the mission, but you need it now." Ryo shared a look with Sasuke. New training regime? They were going to get training? "I am going to take a more proactive approach with you," Kakashi said cheerfully, although Ryo could detect something not quite right in his tone. "Starting with chakra control. Who can do the tree-walking exercise?" Ryo raised his hand with Sasuke. "Okay, Ryo and Sasuke, you are going to work on water walking next. Sakura, come with me, and I'll show you the basics." Ryo walked over to the pond nearby and looked into its depth. It was pretty shallow. It couldn't be that much different than a tree. He placed a foot onto the surface, channeling the chakra like he normally would. He managed to remain above water for a second before he felt the surface move beneath his feet. He lost his grip and sank like a stone, submerging up to his shoulders. He looked up to see Kakashi walking over to them. "It's not like a tree, Ryo." The man-eye smiled. "The water surface is always moving, so the surface you're standing on is also changing. You need to regulate and adjust your chakra output as necessary the whole time you're on the water." He reached out to snag Sasuke's collar, beginning to drag him back towards the clearing. "You work on that while Sasuke and I work on his dodging. I'll rotate you once he manages to avoid being hit for 5 minutes. Horror dawned on Ryo as he realized what was happening. Ni-sen promised not to tell you about that. Naruto didn't. Kakashi shouted back gleefully. His Jounin sensei did. Ryo vowed to unleash some sort of hell on Genma the moment they got back. He hauled himself out of the water and took off his jumper, dumping it off to the side with a wet thump. He glared at the water before he took a step forward, trying to follow Kakashi's instructions. He rapidly sank once again. This was going to be a long week. It had been a long week. Ryo had wanted more effort out of Kakashi in regards to their training, but this was hellish. Sakura had quickly mastered tree walking and had joined him and Sasuke at their small pond. From there they took turns, trying desperately to get out of the way of Kakashi's barrage of painted kunai. He had to take pity on Sakura at one point. If she couldn't do it after 3 hours, he didn't think she was going to. That had just been the first 2 days. Kakashi had made sure they'd have variety for the rest of the week. Physical conditioning and recognizing water clones from the real thing had featured heavily. Ryo had never quite wanted to stab someone as much as he did now. His teacher just sat there, appearing highly entertained by their misery. There was only so much that Ryo could tell himself that it was for their own good before the words became meaningless. They had also rotated the guard around Tazuna, and Ryo hadn't ever thought that building a bridge would be a break. He heaved a breath in as he lay flat on his back on the grass, staring up into the leaves above. Sasuke was propped up by a tree somewhere nearby, and Sakura was on Tazuna duty. He heard the quiet thumps of crutches approaching, and he half-heartedly glared up at his sensei. "You've done really well this week." Kakashi gazed down at him, his expression soft. "I'm really proud of you guys." "Thanks, Kashi-sensei." Ryo smiled back at him, heaving himself into an upright position. "Once we get back to Konoha, we'll keep this up." Kakashi patted Ryo's damp hair lightly. "I promise I'm going to be better." "You were never bad," Ryo responded, slightly confused. "What triggered all this anyway? Why did you change things?" Kakashi straightened. "It was actually a talk I had with Naruto. I should have been doing this from the start, but I had stuff holding me back. He helped me move forward." Ryo's mood soured at the mention of his brother. Of course Nissan had been involved. He had managed to avoid dwelling on thoughts of their fight until now, but he couldn't help the resentment that lingered. He couldn't have anything to himself. Nissan's shadow reached too far for him to ever be able to run from. "Hey, you okay?" He moved away from Kakashi's outstretched hand. "Yeah, I'm fine," he said shortly. "I'll meet you back at the house in a bit." Kakashi lingered for a short moment before Ryo heard the thump of the crutches get further away, vanishing among the trees. He wrapped his arms around his legs, pulling his knees to his chest. "You're being an ass." He snapped round to gape at Sasuke. The Uchiha was staring him down, expression set in an angry scowl. "What do you mean?" "This mess you made with Naruto. You're being an ass, and you know it." Anger washed over him, and Ryo surged to his feet. Sasuke joined him in standing, his face unchanged. "Hey, it's Nissan's fault. He's the one who's always hovering and treating me like I'm dumb and can't do anything. He loves you, Ryo." Sasuke yelled back at him, and Ryo stopped short for a moment. He's never heard Sasuke raise his voice like this. He was the silent, brooding type. You can't resent him for taking care of you. He has given up so much for you, to make sure you want for nothing, and you're treating him like shit for it. What? Did you want him to neglect you or something? No. Ryo shouted hotly, the rage returning stronger. I have to listen to people sing his praises and compare us, and I am never going to win that game. I am never going to be like him. I am always going to be a disappointment next to him. Why are you so fucking stupid? You are never going to disappoint Naruto. I'm pretty sure you could betray the village and become a missing mean, and he would still think the sun shines out of your ass. You don't get it, Sasuke. Ryo screamed. I owe him. I am never going to be able to pay that debt back. I know how much he has had to give up. I had to watch it happen. He never let me help or do anything to lighten the burden. I'm weak, and he's so strong, and I am fed up with having that fact shoved in my face. Kami, you are so fucking selfish. Sasuke gripped his hair, his knuckles white. Have you considered for a second that maybe he shielded you from all that because he didn't want you to go through what he did? Ryo opened his mouth to yell something else, but nothing came out. Sasuke heaved a sigh. Things have been weird since you fucked up, and I know you hate the distance that Naruto's trying to give you. You can't have both. You can't be free of Naruto and have him there for you. You just need to take your head out of your ass long enough to see how lucky you are. Ryo scoffed. You act like Neeson doesn't treat you the same way. You're right. Sasuke's mouth was set in a grim line. Naruto took me in and gave me a home. He gave me a reason to live beyond my clan. And you know what? I can never repay him for that either. He saved me. He treated me like a kid when every single other person treated me like a charity case. Ryo wasn't sure how to respond to that, but Sasuke continued. I get the guilt and the inferiority complex and shit. You act like I didn't live in my brother's shadow growing up. That doesn't give you the right to shit on everyone around you. It doesn't give you the right to drag everything Naruto has done for you through the mud. And it definitely doesn't give you the right to make someone who has only ever done the best for you feel guilty for doing that. Sasuke proceeded to stomp out of the clearing, leaving Ryo standing alone in the darkening clearing. Goosebumps began to rise as his sweat cooled in the evening air, but he couldn't bring himself to move. Sasuke's words kept repeating themselves over and over in his mind, and Ryo knew he wouldn't sleep tonight. You drew that line backwards. Naruto looked back to his own seal and finished up the final symbol. He tilted his head as he scanned it before nodding to himself. He drew a circle on the chain link component and pushed his chakra into the seal. The wall lit up blue and lines stretched out to either side, connecting to the other seals he had placed on the stone. It's a line, Karui scowled. It looks exactly the same as when I draw it the other way. In Fuin Jutsu, it is not only the placement and type of line or kanji, but the way you draw it, Naruto explained patiently. For example, if you were to draw a spiral, the seal would respond differently depending on whether you started from the center or the edge. The symbol that your line will create will not do its job properly, and it will throw the whole array off. Makes sense. That makes sense, she sighed, staring down at her scroll. Why did we agree to this? Naruto chuckled as he looked over to check on the other genin. Omoe was quietly muttering to himself, a dark cloud hanging over him. He peeked over the boy's shoulder and smiled to himself at the decent seal. A bit more work, and he'd be ready. You know, you should teach Fuin Jutsu, Kazuya piped up from his rock. His hair was dripping onto his face, and he was swallowed up by the poncho in that sitting position. You're a good teacher. Yeah, like I have time for that. Naruto rolled his eyes good-naturedly. He was just teaching them one seal, not the whole art of Fuin Jutsu. It would take him a couple years just to get the basics ingrained in them, and those were years he didn't have. Are you done yet? Yujito strolled over to him, Hana close on her heels. Those two were closer than he'd been expecting. They'd said they were going to a perimeter sweep, but Naruto had felt them stop in one place for at least half an hour. He raised an eyebrow at the sight of Yujito's hair coming out of its ponytail, and he looked over just in time to see Hana tug up her poncho to cover some dark marks on her neck. Yeah. He pulled his hood further over his face, the rain pattering against it gently. I want Omoe and Karui to do the last two villages, so we might need to wait, so I can get them up to scratch. Yujito nodded, and they began to walk out of the waterlogged village, heading back to Kumo. The genin spoke among themselves, and Naruto could hear Kazuya grilling Hana about what she had been up to in the woods. Why did they send you here? He looked over to see a serious Yujito. Why did Konoha send you? She insisted. I've been trying to think for days about why they would send you, and nothing makes any tactical sense. I'm a Fuin Jutsu expert, Naruto shrugged. The only one in the village currently, so it's not as if they could have sent someone else. Why not just refuse? Hokage-sama probably wanted some sort of leverage on Kumo, he said, gaining a sharp look from the blonde. Relax. I could care less about that. I came to help. What would they do if they lost you, though? Yujito stared at the wet grass beneath their feet. You're so valuable. I'm pretty sure villages would kill to have you. You're an Uzumaki, who's an expert in Fuin Jutsu and a natural sensor. You're like genetic gold. They don't let me out often, Naruto laughed, pushing away the uneasiness at her words. They thought it was worth the risk, and so do I. He had the thought that he wouldn't be quite so valuable if they knew about his condition. He was damaged goods after all. Are you going to let me go home, or will you breed me like you tried to do with the Hyuga 11 years ago? Yujito turned shocked eyes towards him, missing a step. She collected herself quickly. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay. Naruto decided to test the waters further. Do they treat you well? Being a Jinchuriki and all? Most ones I've met aren't as respected as you. You sensed it? She asked shortly. The first second I saw you, there was a brief silence. You didn't react any differently to me. I'm a bit strange like that. Must be those genetics you keep talking about. He grinned at her slightly exasperated look. She wasn't so bad for a Kimonin. Ryo trailed behind his team, kicking pebbles as he walked. Sasuke had really gotten to him yesterday, and he could not stop thinking about it. The words refused to leave him, and he hated to admit it, but Sasuke was right. He didn't know how to deal with the guilt he had over what Nisen gave up for him, so he just picked the easiest emotion, anger. He couldn't even pinpoint why he only felt this way about Nisen and not Kazune. The worst thing about it all was he didn't know how to stop. He didn't know how to stop using anger as an outlet. The dirt path turned to smooth stone beneath his feet, and he looked up at the bridge, his frame going rigid at the sight. The workers were slumped in various stages of unconsciousness and littered haphazardly around the entrance to the bridge. Blood mixed with salt in the air, and as the mist ascended, he fell back into a defensive stance. It was mirrored by his teammates, and he followed his teacher silently as they walked further onto the bridge. They stopped abruptly as two figures appeared in the mist. One was clearly Zabuza, and as Ryo looked closely, the other was the hunter Nin from before. In a loose, navy kimono and an olive-green turtleneck. 2 long strips of hair framed a white mask, while the rest was tied up into a bun. So I was right, Kakashi said calmly. Your accomplice saved you. Haku. At Zabuza's word, the hunter Nin disappeared and Ryo launched a kunai into the mist. It clanged off Haku's own, and the Nin was forced to duck as Sasuke swung a leg at his head. He hung back from throwing more as Sasuke and Haku exchanged blows. His gut twisted as Haku almost sliced his friend's arm. Your student is strong to be able to match Haku's speed, Zabuza commented. They were interrupted by Haku's voice echoing through the mist. Makio Hyosho. Ryo's heart dropped as Sasuke vanished among a dome made up of sheets of ice, and he shot forward, ignoring Kakashi's call behind him. He broke one of the mirrors as he stopped beside Sasuke, looking back to see it had already reformed. What the fuck did you just do, Ryo? Ryo snapped round to stare at his teammate, the Uchiha glaring daggers at him. They hadn't spoken since their fight last night, and Ryo was pretty sure Sasuke was still mad at him. I came to help. He insisted. You should have attacked from outside, Sasuke hissed. Now we're both stuck in here. I didn't think of that. Obviously you didn't think. Can you really afford to be arguing among yourselves? A soft voice asked, seeming to come from every direction. A hail of Senbon emerged from a mirror, and Ryo tried to dodge, but some still sank into his shin. Sasuke snarled as he sped through hand seals. Katan, Gokaki no Jutsu. The massive ball of flames engulfed a chunk of the mirrors, but it didn't make a dent. Ryo moved through his own seals. Suiton, Mizu Shuriken. The projectile splashed harmlessly against the icy surface. The pit of dread in Ryo's gut deepened. A valiant effort, but ultimately useless. Another storm of Senbon descended, and Ryo cursed as it caught his arm. Sasuke had been hit in the shoulder. There was no way to dodge in this ice cage, as every time Ryo thought he had pinpointed which mirror Haku was using, the enemy moved. He was so fast. Why are you even doing this? He shouted in exasperation. Why try to kill Tazuna? Zabuza-sama needs the money in order to take back Kirigakure, Haku replied, their voice still soft. I am a tool for Zabuza-sama. I exist to make him happy. Wait, what? Ryo frowned. People can't be tools. Do you have a precious person? Someone you would do anything for? Several faces ran through Ryo's head. Nisen, Kazune, Kakashi, Sasuke, Kiba, Tsumba-chan, Jiji, Hananichin, Shikamaru, Chuji. The list was endless. He hadn't quite realized how long it was until this moment, and Nisen was the first on that list. He needed to live through this to apologize to him. Yeah, I do. He felt a strange sense of contentment surrounding them despite the tension in the air. That's good, said Haku. When a person has something important they want to protect, that's when they become truly strong. I want to protect Zabuza-sama's dreams, so I cannot allow you to stop him here. A wave of Senbon hit them from the side, and Ryo cried out as more hit his leg. Sasuke managed to dodge that round, and Ryo supposed that all that dodge training Kakashi made them do over the past was paying off for someone. He felt himself being hauled out of the way of the next wave, and he looked up at Sasuke as he was dumped on the ground. His own eyes widened as he stared at his friend. Sasuke, get your head in the fight. Sasuke snapped at him. You can dodge these. They're getting slower. No! Sasuke, you can just see them better, stated Ryo. Your Sharingan? Sasuke blinked, but before he could respond, Haku spoke. This battle is over. He sent the largest wave yet straight at Ryo, and he desperately tried to stand to get out of the way. His leg gave up on him, and he fell back to the ground, his mind racing trying to figure out how to get out of this. His thoughts came to a screeching halt as Sasuke's back appeared in front of him. He watched in horrified silence as the Senbons hit home, and his friend slumped to the ground, motionless. Sasuke? There was no response. Sasuke! His friend just lay there and Naruto couldn't see him breathing. His breath caught in his throat as he felt his eyes grow hot. He couldn't think. Rage descended over him, and his vision turned red, and he felt something burn its way through him, and power he'd never felt before flow through his limbs. He ripped furious eyes away from the prone form of his teammate and locked onto where he could see Haku on the surface of the mirror. Then everything went black. Ryo came to, and he's not sure how he got here. His hands were on Haku's throat, and he was breathing into his face. The mask had disappeared, and he was surprised to see how delicate Haku's features were. At first glance, he would have thought they were a girl, but there was something in their jawline that made him doubt that. He had backed up Haku into the bridge wall, and as he looked behind him, his eyes widened at the debris strewn across the rest of the bridge. Piles of ice were scattered around, and there were deep cuts in the brick. He looked back down at Haku and opened his mouth, closing it after a long moment. He could feel Haku's pulse beneath his fingers, and his dark eyes were glued to Ryo's face, wide in fear. He loosened his grip slightly as he tried to gather his thoughts. What? He began, but he wasn't sure how to continue. You defeated me, Haku said quietly. Now you must kill me. Ryo snatched his hands back and stared at them in horror. No! Why do I have to do that? I beat you. You can just surrender. I have no more use as a Zabuza-sama's tool. He doesn't need me anymore. Can you understand? Not having a dream of your own, not being needed by anyone. The pain of being alive. I'm better off dead. No! Ryo shouted back. No! You're not just a tool. No one is. You don't have to be needed to earn the right to live. You can find your own dream. That's what life is. I only live to protect Zabuza-sama's dream. Haku's expression was pained. Often people have it wrong, mistakenly believing that showing mercy is a kindness. They spare the foe whose life is in their hands. But don't you see? It's an empty existence to go on living alone and unloved, when defeat has already cost you your dream. Why do you think you only get one chance to achieve your dreams? Ryo insisted, getting back up after failing. That's the best way forward. As long as you're alive, you can try over and over again. I killed your friend. His eyes widened, gaze snapping to Sasuke. Something bothered him, and he pushed as much chakra into his eyes as he could without damaging them. He saw the almost imperceptible rise and fall of his friend's breathing, and he whipped around to look at Haku. He hadn't killed him. Sasuke was alive. Hurt but alive. Then why had he insisted that he killed him? Before Ryo could point that out, his attention was caught by the fight further up the bridge as a bright burst of lightning cut through the mist. Haku vanished from in front of him, and Ryo cursed. Following him, Kakashi had his fist aimed at Zabuza's chest, and the chirping of birds surrounded them. He watched Haku dive in front of the lightning-encased fist, and he had to think fast. Suedun, Dai Baku Sui Shoha. He pulled from the sea water that surrounded the bridge and slammed it into the pair of mercenaries. He wasn't sure why he found water techniques so much easier to learn, but he was grateful for it now. He would have to learn more when they got back to Konoha, since that was the second and only other jutsu he had in his repertoire. Kazune had tried to discourage him when he'd found him with the scroll, but Ryo was determined, even if it was a B-rank technique. All he needed to do was a large body of water, since he couldn't form that much from the air yet. Kakashi's attack missed, and Zabuza and Haku were washed up the bridge. Kakashi turned to face him, his eyes flaring with annoyance. You can't kill them. Ryo, they're not doing this to be evil. They are our enemy. Well, what do we have here? They all turned towards the nasally voice. Ryo spotted a small man with spiked-up hair, tiny sunglasses, and ugly black suit smirking at them. He was backed by dozens of rough-looking men, armed with a variety of weapons. Zabuza, why is the bridge builder not dead yet? Ryo looked over to Tazuna for the first time, surprised to see Sakura still standing in front of him, although she was sending fevered glances towards Sasuke's body. No matter, Gato continued, it just means that I can kill you all in one sweep. Less chasing around for me to do. You would betray us? Zabuza asked lowly, his tone dangerous. I was never going to pay you, Gato shrugged. Now die quietly. Ryo looked up at his teacher as the horde of mercenaries began to walk towards them. He was distracted by Zabuza stepping forward, raising his massive sword to his shoulder. Looks like we have no reason to be your enemy. Sharingan no Kakashi, Zabuza announced. Tazuna is safe from us. Now, I can assist you with taking out the trash. Kakashi and Zabuza nodded once to each other before they launched themselves forward. Ryo watched them cut through the rank of mercenaries like it was nothing. Were they keeping score? Why did you do that? He turned to Haku, their eyes scanning him desperately. You didn't kill Sasuke, was all he said. He looked back to see Zabuza decapitate Gato with a wide swing, and something uncoiled in his gut. The mission was over. Tazuna and Wave would be safe. Haku moved past him to kneel next to Sasuke, carefully pulling the Senbon from his body. The Uchiha sat up with a deep breath, his chest heaving, and as he caught sight of Haku, he weakly tried to scramble away. Ryo ran forwards and flung his arms around Sasuke. You can never do that again, okay? What happened? Sasuke asked, his voice right next to Ryo's ear. I beat Haku and then stopped Kashi-sensei from killing both of them. Ryo let him go but still held on to his shoulders tightly. Then Gato turned with a bunch of other mercenaries and betrayed Zabuza. He and Kashi-sensei killed them all. So we aren't fighting them anymore. Sasuke tried to keep up. We have no reason to be enemies, Haku confirmed, echoing Zabuza's words from earlier. The mist began to lift. So, what are you guys going to do now? Ryo asked. Whatever Zabuza-sama desires, Haku said with a soft smile. You guys could go back to Kirigakure. They all looked over to Kakashi. You needed money to overthrow the Mizukage, right? He continued. My guess is because of the bloodline purge. You want to keep Haku safe. You don't know anything, Zabuza snapped. Haku is just a weapon, a tool to be used. Kakashi waved a hand dismissively at his words. Yeah. Try that again when you mean it. The new Mizukage has 2 bloodline limits. Haku would be welcomed with open arms, and I'm sure they'd be happy to get one of their 7 swordsmen back. He stared pointedly at Zabuza's headband. If you were truly missing Nin, you would have scored out your village's symbol a long time ago. Zabuza appeared to think on Kakashi's words. Gazing at Haku, Sakura dragged Tazuna over to them, her eyes still on Sasuke. Wait, just like that? You were all going to kill each other a minute ago, and now we're friends. Not friends, Kakashi and Zabuza said in unison. With Gato dead, they have no reason to kill Tazuna, Kakashi explained. We have no reason to fight. It would just be a waste of resources and energy that could be better spent elsewhere. Ryo grinned at Haku. I wouldn't mind being friends. Haku looked back at him in surprise before they smiled back at him. Ryo let go of Sasuke as the Uchiha began to move slowly. Do you mind waiting to make friends with the guy who stabbed me until I'm at least 5 feet away? He groaned. Ryo laughed, the relief strong. He felt light, and while he was nervous about when he blacked out, he decided not to focus on that right now. Things felt like they were finally going to be okay. Chapter 29. Excuse me, that's my emotional support brother Ryo shuffled his feet as Kakashi finished his verbal mission report, handing over the written version to Gigi. Gigi was on the mission assignment desk today, a rare occurrence, and he was looking at them with a twinkle in his eye. Well, Norio-kun, it seems your brother's penchant for being assigned missions that go awry is a genetic trait, said the Hokage. I am glad it all worked out in the end. Hopefully when Wave's economy stabilizes, we will have an ally in them. I think we will stick to D ranks for now, Hokage-sama. Kakashi smiled. We'll focus on our training before we venture out again. They were distracted by a commotion behind the large doors behind them, and Ryo watched his brother's team walk in. Nissan was laughing at something Hananichin had said, and it hurt to see his smile drop when he spotted him. He had to fix things with Nissan as soon as possible. They all looked a bit damp. Nissan had ditched the black crop top and had donned a ragged, beige jumper that Ryo had never seen before. None of them were wearing exactly what they had left for the mission in. He caught Kazune's eyes and tried to convey his confusion. Kazune looked down at his own bright pink jumper that reached his knees and chuckled. Everything we brought with us got soaked, he said in good humor. It took until we were leaving, but Yujiro finally took pity on us and threw these at our heads as we left the country. Be prepared to be surrounded by laundry at least for the next week. We were expecting you 3 back sooner, Gigi interrupted. Nissan stepped forward and bowed low. It was still strange to see the stilted relationship between them. Ryo could remember the days where Nissan would hang around the office with him and chat to Gigi about anything and everything. It had changed sometime around the time Sasuke lost his family, and Ryo had no idea why. We were delayed, Hokage-sama, he said evenly. Teaching Kyumo-gen and the seal and related maintenance took longer than expected. You were not ordered to teach them that seal. Gigi's expression was unreadable. It seemed like the right thing to do. The pair glared at each other. Some sort of unspoken conversation between them. Ryo didn't know what was going on, and it was apparent that nobody else did either. The Hokage was the first to break eye contact, and Ryo tried not to let the surprise show on his face. He didn't think that the leader of the whole village would have backed down like that. Are you aware that your bingo book entry was updated in your absence? Gigi said idly, shuffling some papers on his desk. No. Nissan frowned, reaching forward to accept the open book. He took a moment to read, and Ryo resisted the urge to walk over and read over his brother's shoulder. Nissan's face twisted, and as Kazune peeked at it, he winced. Hananichin followed suit, and it just made Ryo more curious. What does it say? Sasuke finally asked. I'm still B rank, but Naruto is A rank now. Kanzuya replied. They've got his Fuinjutsu and sensing down too, so that cat is out of the bag. My bad. That's also a dick move of them. Hananichin scowled. We help and teach them, and they react like this. It is Kyumo. Kanzuya shrugged. Nissan closed the book with a huff. It's not a big deal, he decided. It's not as if I leave the village very often, and it was bound to happen eventually. I thought my sensing abilities would have been made public before this. There was a brief silence. So, what are you guys doing here? Kazune clapped his hands, very obviously trying to change the subject. What horrors are you being assigned today? Actually, we're just back from a mission, Ryo quickly replied. We got our first C rank. Hey, that's great. Kanzuya grinned, walking forward to ruffle his hair. He proceeded to do the same to Sasuke and Sakura, and Ryo laughed at the looks on their faces. Kiba has been talking about getting one for ages, Hana chimed. He's going to be jealous. Where'd you go? We went to Wave, Sakura said, a bit quieter than usual. She'd been subdued the entire trip back to Konoha. She hadn't even said a word to Sasuke. She just stared at the ground as they walked, expression twisted in thought. Wave! All eyes turned to Nissan. How did you get a C rank to Wave? He continued intensely. With the Gato situation, no one should be going there. I ordered the Chunin to suspend missions until we could get more up-to-date reconnaissance. Ryo looked down at his feet as an awkward quiet settled over the room. It appeared that no one wanted to answer him. Well, Naruto. It was issued as a C rank, but in a completely unprecedented series of events that no one could have predicted. It may or may not have been upgraded to an A rank, Kakashi said nervously. Ryo internally thanked him for his sacrifice. What events? Nissan demanded. Oh, you know, Momochi's a buzzer. It all worked out, though. You can probably start sending missions to Wave again now that Gato is dead. Nissan froze, and the urge to run hit Ryo like a tree. Nissan didn't get angry often, and he had never directed it at them, but when he was, it made the hairs on the back of Ryo's neck stand up. At what point in this mission did you figure out that the mission was no longer a C rank? Nissan asked quietly. Was it a point where you could have turned back Kakashi? Kakashi didn't answer, and Ryo cringed. That was as good as admitting it. He almost wished that Nissan would shout or explode or something. The quiet was so much worse. You and I will have a chat about this later. Nissan's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'll speak to my department about issuing correct mission ranks. Nissan stepped forward, and Ryo tried not to flinch as Nissan rested his hand on his shoulder. You guys did really well. Nissan smiled gently. It must have been hard, but you pulled through. You're all going to be amazing Shinobi. Ryo stared up at him as warmth spread through him. I apologize for the interruption, but you are free to go. Team 7, Gigi spoke up. I need Team Hurry's mission report, and I suspect you would all like to relax a bit after your adventures. Of course, Hokage-sama. Kakashi Eye smiled as he began to shove Ryo and his teammates out the door. Ryo suspected he just wanted to get away from Nissan. Just before he was escorted out of the room, he saw Nissan slip some yen over to Kazune. He would have to ask Nissan which bet he lost. Naruto scowled as he stomped through his front door, kicking off his sandals in a random direction and throwing his orange jumper in the vicinity of the kitchen table. He was only gone for 5 weeks, and yet his department was apparently incapable of running themselves without his supervision. Wave was only the first mistake. They had also managed to send an unqualified team to the land of rivers, so they were pissed at them again just when they had managed to get out their bad books last year. The Chunin had also forgotten to send files to both the registry and accounts, so there were at least 4 teams who would be paid late and were currently unavailable to do another mission despite being in the village. Naruto had left notes for it to be done, and everything was on the large map in the office. He had made sure to put a bright red note on Wave and everything. It wasn't until he left the mission assignment desk that he realized how much he did. It was one thing to be immersed in it day after day, but coming back to it after a break, with so much to pick up and sort out, maybe he should start delegating more. That might help to avoid issues like this in the future. Plus, he lost 5,000 yen to Kinzuya. He was so sure he would win that bet considering he was the one running the desk, and therefore could ensure that Ryo and his team got a mission that wouldn't go off the rails like it usually did. He still refused to admit that it might be a genetic trait. They couldn't prove anything. He looked up and spotted Ryo on the couch, and he couldn't help but freeze. He had avoided thinking about the whole issue while he'd been in the land of lightning, but he knew that he couldn't do that forever. He just wasn't sure what else to do. He wanted to give Ryo the space he wanted, but he wasn't sure how to do that. It was ingrained in him to be there and try to give Ryo the best he could. The only thing he could come up with was steering clear of his little brother altogether, but that made the void in his gut grow with every minute he did so. Wait, Nissan. He forced a smile on his face. Hey, Ryo, I didn't know you were home. An awkward pause. Where's Kaz and Sasuke? And Momo? Out. Ryo's eye darted away from him for a moment. I want to talk to you. Oh. Naruto moved forward slowly, tentatively sitting on the other sofa. What did he do wrong? He'd been trying so hard. He can't have messed us up. Ryo fidgeted in his seat, and Naruto pressed his lips together so he wouldn't say anything. Nissan, Ryo started. Naruto leaned forward a bit, trying to show he was listening. Wait, was he paying too much attention? Was Ryo feeling pressured? He leaned back into the couch cushions, but cringed as Ryo's face dropped further. I'm so sorry. Ryo finally burst out, violet eyes glistening. I shouldn't have said all that stuff, and I treated you so horribly. I'm so sorry. Hey! It's okay. Naruto immediately moved himself to sit beside his brother. You don't have to apologize for speaking your mind. It's my fault for making you feel like you couldn't talk to me before you stored it all up. No! But Nissan, the way I spoke to you, Ryo sniffed. You've given me everything and I'm just so ungrateful. Hey! Let's not talk like that. Naruto slung an arm around Ryo's shoulders and pulled him in. I know I can be a bit overprotective and overbearing, and I promise I'm going to try and work on that, but you're a kid. My kid. You're allowed to yell and throw tantrums every so often. I would prefer if you just talk to me, though. I promise I'll talk to you. Ryo nodded his head rapidly. I sometimes forget you're a genin, you know. Naruto smiled softly. I still sometimes think of you as the little kid who decided that every Wednesday was coloring in day and who spoke to everyone we know inviting them to a bird's funeral. I was 6, Ryo mumbled under his breath. What I mean is that you're so grown up now. Naruto chuckled. I need to remember that, and it's okay if you remind me. But Nissan, you never got the chance to be a kid. Ryo turned tearful violet eyes on him. It's my fault you couldn't do stuff because you had to take care of me. Naruto squeezed Ryo tightly. It was my choice, Ryo, and I wouldn't change anything for the world, Naruto sighed. Despite what you appear to believe, I had a great childhood. It just ended earlier than most, but that's okay. I like taking care of you. There's also Sasuke and Momo, and so I would have always ended up taking care of someone. It's who I am. He grinned brightly. Plus, while I've missed out on some stuff, I got to experience loads of others that I otherwise wouldn't have. I've had a good life, sunshine. Ryo nodded and stared down at his lap. I just don't want that distance ever again. We'll find a happy medium, Naruto reassured. We can work on finding it together. Okay, Ryo whispered. Naruto looked down at him and there was something else. In Wave, we were fighting Haku and he hit Sasuke and I thought he died and I blacked out and I don't remember what I did, but I think it was the QB. I think he got out. Naruto took a deep breath. If the QB got out, you would know about it, he said slowly, images of fire and rubble lingering at the back of his mind. There wouldn't be a wave or bridge left. I think you just used some of its chakra. Really? Ryo peered up at him. How do you know? I've seen it in the other Jinchuriki. Gaara and Yujito are both able to use some of their BJUS chakra and traits in a fight. I don't know anything about being a Jinchuriki, Ryo frowned. Honestly, Naruto knocked his head gently against his brother's. Neither do I. I can help you figure it out, but only if you want me to. If this is something you want to do on your own, I'll respect that. Ryo turned and wrapped his arms around Naruto's torso, hugging tightly. Naruto rested his other arm around his little brother and closed his eyes as he rested his head on Ryo's. He had missed this warmth. He was going to make sure he was better in the future, so Ryo didn't feel like this again. He never wanted to lose his little brother again. Sasuke sighed as he hauled himself up the final set of stairs. Kakashi hadn't been kidding when he'd said he would intensify their training. Not that he wasn't grateful that the man had gotten over himself. He could hope this meant he was getting stronger. Itachi was still out there. Boom! Sasuke ducked, bracing himself as the floor shook beneath him. He took in quick breaths as the adrenaline from the initial shock coursed through him. He rested a hand on the wall next to him, but the vibrations had stopped. Looking ahead, his eyes widened as he spotted the dust coming out from under one of the doors. That was the Uzumaki's apartment. He launched himself forward and slammed the door open, coughing as the cloud hit him straight on. He waved a hand in front of his face as he stepped forward carefully. "Hello." He saw a shape move in the dust. "Sasuke? Naruto?" He came out of the cloud, holding his right arm. His long red hair was tangled and disheveled, and he wasn't wearing his brace. His black t-shirt was now brown with dirt, and Sasuke's heart jumped at the blood dripping down from the cut above his right eyebrow. He looked down at the arm Naruto was holding, and Sasuke could swear something was out of place underneath his tattooed fingers. Sasuke tore his gaze from the injured redhead to look around the apartment. The kitchen seemed fine and the back window was intact, along with the plants beneath it. It was when he looked over to the living room area that the chaos began. He could see some chunks of concrete on the carpeted floor, but before he could see what it belonged to, Naruto spoke up. "Help me open the window," he coughed. Sasuke ran over to the large windows and shoved them open. He took a deep breath of fresh air before he turned back. He froze as he spotted the source of the concrete. "Don't tell Kazuya." Naruto blurted out, his blue eyes pitiful. "I think he's going to notice," Sasuke said dubiously, his eyes still locked onto the damage. "I know," Naruto admitted reluctantly. "It was instinctive." "What happened, Naruto?" Sasuke stepped forward and picked his way through the increasing amounts of debris. The worn couches had not been spared, and he was pretty sure the warped pieces of metal used to be the coffee table. He picked his gaze up to look at the gaping hole in the wall. He flinched as a few more pieces dropped to the floor from the opening. Peering into the hole, he could see the spare room of his own flat. He had never really used it, but it was strange to see it from this angle. "See, I got an idea for a new seal, and I began messing around a bit, you know? I know I'm not meant to do it here, but it's been years since I blew something up, and I thought I was being careful. Naruto, you've blown up the coffee table a few times and a bunch of other stuff, but this is a wall. You blew up a wall. Our wall. I can see my flat." "Yeah." Naruto winced. "I was drawing a kanji, but my hand was shaky and my vision was a bit blurry, and one cough meant that I drew the wrong thing. It was a miracle I managed to throw it at the wall. We'd be missing some of the kitchen otherwise." Sasuke just continued staring at the wall, before turning back to Naruto, then turning back to the wall. "Okay, so maybe I shouldn't have been drawing seals in the first place. It's not a load-bearing wall, so it's not going to collapse. Plus, you know, now you have a shortcut to our flat." Naruto tried to smile, but Sasuke could see the pain in his expression. He sighed and abandoned his stare at the massive hole in the wall to go over to Naruto. "Come on, I'll take you to the hospital, and we can work on our excuse for Kazuya," he sighed, maneuvering himself underneath Naruto's tattooed arm to take some of his weight. "Pretty sure he's working today, so we have until we reach the hospital." Naruto tried to joke, but he ended up coughing heavily. "This cold from Kyomo is lasting a while," Sasuke commented, and he felt Naruto stiffen beneath him. "Yeah, the dust isn't helping either," he joked nervously. Sasuke felt like there was something that Naruto wasn't saying, but he dismissed it. There were more pressing issues at the moment. "I was going to talk to you about Itachi," Sasuke said quietly, "about how I was going to find him and get him to talk. I want to know what really happened." Naruto squeezed his shoulder. "I know, Sasuke, and I'm going to be here to help with whatever you need. I kind of owe you for the wall." He chuckled lowly before he became serious. "I have something to show you regarding that. Tomorrow, when Kazuya and Ryo go out after breakfast. I'll tell Kakashi you'll be late." Sasuke nodded as he began to help Naruto down the stairs. It had taken 2 weeks, fixing the damage and many, many apologies, but Naruto had finally managed to get Kazuya to forgive him for the wall incident. He suspected that it would be brought up many times in the future, hopefully evolving into an inside joke eventually, but he would bear it. He had also had to promise to never design seals in the apartment again, which he thought was more than fair. The weather from Kyomo had messed with his body, and when he'd been drawing the ceiling, he could barely see the paper in front of him. He had also been so dizzy that instead of focusing on the seal itself, he'd been thinking about going to bed. It wasn't his finest moment, but he'd been studying Fuinjutsu for 8 years. He hadn't thought he would screw it up so badly. It was a novelty having a cast on his right arm for a change, and he'd been freed from it yesterday. For the first time in a blue moon, he and Kinzuya managed to get several consecutive hours off at the same time, so they had decided to spend the afternoon helping out Tenjiro. He felt bad that they hadn't been able to help him out much in recent years, but he was going to make it up to him today. The man had an entire backlog waiting for delivery, and Naruto was confident that they could get it all done. He was feeling good today, too. "Hey, is that Kiba?" Naruto followed Kinzuya's gaze to a nearby cafe, and he spotted the Inuzuka. He was seated with his teammates, and as he looked further, he saw Team 8 and Team 7 there too with their sensei. Kinzuya took his braced arm in his and marched them over to the large table. "Hello," he said cheerfully. Naruto smiled next to him as he took in the genin seated. He was glad that Ryo and Sasuke managed to keep up with so many from their graduating class. He only ever had Kinzuya and Hana. He never interacted with anyone else. "Kinzuya?" Ino grinned. "Naruto-san." "Please drop the san, Ino." Naruto grimaced. "You've all been in my house long enough to drop the formalities." "I haven't been to your place," Ino frowned. "Oh, well, next time Shikamaru and Chuji come round, tag along. We always make enough for at least 8. What are you guys doing today?" Kurenai interjected, smiling gently at them. "Deliveries for Tenjiro," Naruto supplied. "Do we have to introduce ourselves to anyone here?" Kinzuya interrupted, scrutinizing the seated shinobi. "I think we know all of you. Except you. Who are you?" He pointed at Asuma, and Naruto reached forward to lower his friend's outstretched arm. "That's Sarutobi Asuma, Team 10 Sensei." Naruto rolled his eyes. "He's also taken." Kinzuya scanned the man head to toe and shrugged. Asuma choked on his drink and waved a hand desperately in denial. Naruto noticed Kurenai turning a lovely shade of pink and suppressed his grin. There was nothing official, but the bets were alive and well. Naruto personally, though they were already together, but no one could prove anything. His loss. Naruto frowned slightly as he noted Kakashi's absence. "Don't you have to be stupid somewhere that isn't here?" Sasuke deadpanned. "Not until 6. Kinzuya grinned unrepentantly. Naruto shared a look with the Uchiha. He had shown the kid the corkboard and the stack of evidence he'd gathered. He was still missing a massive piece of the puzzle and had begun to pay closer attention to the chakra signatures moving around the village. His years of testing AMBU on their stealth training meant he could name most of them, but there was still a large chunk of signatures he didn't know. Up to now, he had attributed them all to the AMBU, but now he wasn't so sure. Speaking of Usagi, Suzume, Fukuru, he called out, "You're caught. Try again tomorrow." One of the civilians behind him let out a loud curse as he threw his hat to the ground and stormed off. A woman in the corner of the cafe pushed her chair back and followed the man, shooting him a dirty glare. He could feel Fukuru move off the roof above them, annoyance flaring in his signature. The genin were shooting him strange looks. What was that about? Chuji was the one to ask, still chewing his barbecue. "Holy shit," Kiba stared, ignoring the reprimand from his Jounin sensei. "You're serious? And they haven't caught him once in 5 years," Kinzuya gleefully added. "Are you meant to be telling us this?" Shikamaru raised an eyebrow. "I mean, probably not, but I'm not giving away their identities or anything, so..." Naruto dismissed the concern. "It wouldn't help anyway, since I have most of Konoha's signatures memorized, so it's not as if they're special. Actually, a good portion of Suna and Kumo too, probably." This prompted more looks between the genin, and he wasn't sure why. "Your brother is extra, Ryo." He heard Chuji whisper to Ryo. "You should hear about the hole in the wall," Ryo whispered back. "So," Naruto said loudly, trying to steer the conversation away from that particular topic. "Where's Kakashi?" "Ah, Naruto. It's nice to know you care about me," Kakashi said sweetly, poking his head over Naruto's shoulder. Naruto shoved lightly at Kakashi's mask, and the Jounin moved around him, shooing over Rio so he could take a seat at the table. "Where have you been, Kaka-sensei?" asked Sakura. "The best things take time, Sakura-chan." Kakashi I smiled. "That's why I'm always late." Naruto rolled his eyes. "So, how do you know everyone?" Ino demanded, and Naruto recognized that spark of gossip in her eye. "I'm pretty sure almost everyone here has been round to our house for a meal or something," Kanzuya answered, recognizing a kindred spirit. "We've had missions with Kurenai, mainly through the mission assignment desk really," Naruto shrugged. "Although Shikamaru, Chuji, and Kiba have been coming round since the academy. We've known Kiba since he was a little thing hiding behind his mother's legs. He brought Hinata and Shino over when they first graduated. Kiba whined and Naruto grinned at him. "Ah, don't be embarrassed, Kiba," Kanzuya laughed. "We won't tell them the stories of you and Rio from when you were toddlers." Rio joined his best friend in indignation, and Naruto held his own laughter in. "Are you dating anyone, Naruto?" Ino continued with her questions. He froze at the question. "No," he said slowly. "Why?" "My cousin Yui has had a major crush on you for ages. She works in the T&I department, and she always talks about you. I just want to know if you're available." Naruto felt slightly thunderstruck. Someone had a crush on him? Why did someone have a crush on him? Had he met this woman? What was he supposed to do with that? "I think you broke him, Ino," Kanzuya said in amusement, gently nudging Naruto's ribs. "I don't date," Naruto blurted out without thinking. This drew inquiring looks from most of the seated genin. "What, like ever?" Ino asked dubiously. "I just don't," Naruto stuttered, still blindsided by this whole topic. It wasn't something he ever thought about. He didn't look at people and think they're hot or "I would like to kiss them." His team had no problems in this area, but he'd always felt different. His thoughts were always occupied by work or seals or his family or whatever he had going on. Would it be nice to have someone he could rely on and relax with at the end of a hard day? He had that in his family, but there were always the thoughts of taking care of them and being there for them. Did he want someone to take care of him for once? To be hugged instead of giving them? Maybe. He dismissed those thoughts as quickly as they'd come. His family was enough for him. A partner would just be one more person to hurt when he died. He involuntarily turned desperate eyes to Kakashi, praying the man would get the message and save him from this line of questioning. "Ma! Ino-chan, you're assuming Naruto can tear himself away from work long enough." The Jounin waved a hand dismissively. "Besides, Kanzuya is the dating man. You should see him at the bars." Naruto smiled gratefully, and Kakashi nodded back. Kanzuya squawked indignantly next to him. "Can you quit talking about my brother's love lives?" Rio groaned, hiding his head in his hands. "It's not something I ever want to think about." "Yeah, we have to go anyway." Naruto shoved Kanzuya's shoulders hard as they started to walk away. "Nice to see you all, bye." Naruto walked quickly away from the cafe, trying to escape any more probing questions from the Yamanka heir. He didn't want to think about stuff like that. He had enough going on. Kanzuya made another note on the scroll in front of him, tilting his head as he scrutinized it. He caught a glimpse of the new doorway to Sasuke's apartment, and he couldn't stop himself from shaking his head. Naruto really had to be more careful, but Kanzuya couldn't bring himself to be upset with him. His illness had flared up badly, and he knew Naruto would never have made a mistake like that normally. He was getting worse. There was a knock at the door, and Kanzuya didn't bother to get up, yelling, "Come in," from his seat. Sakura slowly entered the flat, and Kanzuya smiled at her. "Hey, Sakura," he greeted. "You know you don't have to knock. You're part of the family." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The much shorter length suited her. "Are you busy?" "Nah, I'm just finishing up some lesson plans for you guys." Kanzuya grinned. "Kurenai and Asuma asked if I could teach their team first aid to, so I'm just sorting through the material." "Okay." Sakura hovered awkwardly before she perched on the edge of one of the kitchen chairs. Kanzuya shoved all the paperwork aside, and he placed his attention on the girl. "What's wrong?" She began hesitantly. I need to get stronger. Okay, Kazuya nodded. What brought this on? You've already come a long way since you graduated from the academy. It's not enough, Sakura cried, and she turned tearful eyes to Kazuya. Kazuya reached forward and grasped her hand, squeezing gently. I'm the weak link, she said quietly. Ryo and Sasuke-kun are so strong and so far ahead of me. They got a head start, and I'm never going to be able to close the distance. I was too busy worrying about my hair and clothes and perfume to wake up and take being a kunoichi seriously. Hey! Just because they're ahead of you now doesn't mean they always will be. Kazuya tried to reassure her. You might need to work harder, but you can do it. In Wave, all I did was stand around next to Tazuna-san, she sniffed. I know I was technically protecting him, but it didn't feel like it. I just watched as Ryo and Sasuke-kun helped Kaka-sensei and fought Haku, and I hated it. Every second of it. I just don't measure up. Kazuya nodded along, taking in her words. She was finally waking up to her reality. He'd managed to get her into decent kunoichi gear and off the diet and off Sasuke's back, but nothing would really change until she decided it for herself. Leaving the academy and getting away from the rest of Sasuke's fan club was doing wonders for her, but it seemed like this mission was the tipping point. So, what are you going to do about it? Her eyes widened at him. He waited as Sakura appeared to think something over. Her tears dried up and her face set into a firm look of determination. I'm going to get stronger, she stated firmly. And I want you to train me. Surprise shot through him. Me? Why me? He spluttered. Why not Kakashi or Naruto? They have experience training genin. Sakura shook her head. I want you, she insisted. I'm never going to be physically stronger, but the way you fight means that doesn't matter. You're a good teacher. I love the first aid stuff, and you've always treated me like I could be something. Hey, Kakashi doesn't. I know Kaka-sensei doesn't mean to, Sakura interrupted. In training and stuff, he treats us all the same, but he doesn't push me like he does them. I don't even think he knows he's doing it. Maybe it's because I'm civilian-born or that I didn't take things seriously at first, but I want things to change. Kazuya considered her for a long moment before he finally nodded. Okay, he gave in. I'll train you, but it won't be easy, you hear me? Sakura nodded quickly as he continued. You'll still train with your team before Kakashi arrive, and we'll spend the day with them like you normally do. You're going to follow the meal plan I'm going to make for you, and there are exercises and studies that I'll ask you to complete each week. I'll speak to the hospital about getting a more regular work schedule, but for now it's going to be more sporadic. It'll either be before you meet up with Team 7 in the morning or after dinner. You following this? Sakura looked slightly overwhelmed, but there was a glint of steel in her eye. How are your parents? Are they aware of this? Sakura curled into herself slightly at the mention of her family. They're both civilians, so they don't really get the shinobi lifestyle, she admitted. Ka-sen has been commenting that she barely sees me and that I'm changing. I don't think she likes it. There was something the girl wasn't saying. He waited patiently as she appeared to debate whether to say anything. Sakura, if we're going to train together, we need to be honest, Kazuya prompted. I promise I will never lie to you, and everything you say will be held in strict confidence. I won't tell anyone, not even Naruto? She asked quietly. Not even Naruto. This promise seemed to help her come to a decision. She keeps making these comments about how much I'm eating, she said with an undertone of shame in her voice. She thinks I'm going to get fat. She doesn't like that I'm not wearing perfume or makeup anymore. She keeps saying how much money it costs and that I'm being wasteful. She thinks I shouldn't be a kunoichi, that I should just settle down with a good man and be a good wife. Sakura, Kazuya gripped her hand tightly. She doesn't hurt me or anything, she was quick to say. She gives me everything I need, and I know I ask for too much at times anyway. She just wants the best for me. Sakura, civilians think very differently from us, Kazuya said gently. They can't understand us and vice versa. However, that doesn't give your mother the right to make you feel guilty for your choices. It's your life, and you're the only one who can live it. I just feel like I'm disappointing her, she said weakly. Sakura, are you serious about being a kunoichi? Her head snapped up from where it had drifted down in shame. Her wide green eyes stared at Kazuya, and a million emotions flickered through them. She was the most expressive kid out of them all. He hoped she never lost that. Yeah, she affirmed. I'm more than serious. I don't think I've ever been sure about anything. I can't go on another mission like Wave and be useless again. I won't. Then you can't worry about what your mother thinks, he consoled. You're making a choice and you have to stick by it. He considered her for a moment. You can move in here, you know, he said, trying to be casual about it. I know the boys won't mind if I ask them, and we recently got an extension. He got a giggle from her at his last comment. He let go of her hand and offered her a scroll. You want to help organize Team 10's lessons? She shook her head, standing quickly. Sorry, but I have to go meet up with Ryo and Sasuke-kun. Kaka-sensei will be there in an hour, and I want to get in a few laps. Kazuya nodded at her, watching her leave the apartment with a bounce in her step that hadn't been present when she first walked in. She was finally taking her future seriously, and he couldn't be more proud of her. Naruto, Gunma waved down his former student as he entered the Jounin standby station. The tall man turned sparkling blue eyes to him and walked over, his orange jacket still clashing horribly with his bright red hair. Kazuya hadn't ever managed to talk him out of those color combinations, though Gunma could remember him trying many times. Hi, Gunma-sensei, Naruto beamed. I haven't seen you since the last team dinner. Yeah, we really need to start doing those every month again instead of every 3, for months, he replied, his own grin just as wide. Naruto plopped himself onto the red sofa next to him. Tell that to our schedules. His student rolled his eyes. I knew when you guys were genin that you would grow up to be unapologetic workaholics, but even I didn't realize the extent to which you guys would go. Please, Gunma-sensei. Naruto nudged his shoulders. You act like you didn't work us to the bone, therefore contributing to our workaholic nature. You're just as much to blame. How will I ever live with myself? Gunma rested a hand across his eyes dramatically. Causing an existential crisis again, Naruto? Don't you do enough of that at work? Gunma's eyes shot open and he hurled himself to his feet, snapping off a quick salute as he stood at attention. The Nara clan had raised a thin eyebrow at him. At ease, Gunma. He smiled wryly. I was just around chasing up some late mission reports. Are you fuck? Naruto laughed. You don't chase down late reports. So which poor soul caught your attention today? Gunma could only watch in horror. This was Nara Shikaku, the Jounin commander. He was their boss, the boss of every Jounin in Konoha. He was the Hokage's right-hand man and tactical advisor. Gunma couldn't even imagine the levels of information that the man was privy to, and Naruto just swore at him while laughing. Is this how his student's career ended? At least he would stop overworking himself. His horror only grew as Shikaka laughed. There was a new Jounin who I heard was excellent at shogi. Shikaka shrugged. I just wanted to see for myself. It's not often I get to play someone new. Takayama-kun? Naruto asked. I'll make sure to warn him next time I see him. You talk like I'm going to maul the boy. You might maul his brain. What the fuck is going on? As they both turned to him in confusion, Gunma realized he had spoken aloud. He swallowed nervously as Shikaka's dark eyes scrutinized him. I just mean, Shikaka-sama, that I wasn't aware you knew each other so well. He backtracked quickly. Why do you keep calling him Sama? Naruto asked, still slouched comfortably on the red sofa. It's just Shikaka. Some people actually treat me with respect, brat. Shikaka shot back good-naturedly. Something you could do with learning. I'll start calling you Shikaka-sama when you quit dumping your work on me and drooling on my office furniture. He turned to Gunma with a smile, completely unfazed by the rank of the man in front of him. I end up doing his work, since he would much prefer to take a nap. He playfully rolled his eyes. It's not like I'm busy running the desk or anything. As the two continued to bicker, a horrifying realization dawned on Gunma. Naruto was so high up at the desk, he was not only running it, but he was doing some of the work of the Jounin commander. He spoke to one of the highest-ranked officials in the entire village, like he would his teammates, and he got away with it. Did this make Naruto his boss? His student probably arranged his missions and pay, and how hadn't he realized that his youngest student had managed to reach such heights? The worst thing, as he watched Naruto snark back at the Nara clan head, was that Naruto didn't even seem to click. He had no idea how much power he had. He would probably be offended if Genma pointed out that he was technically his boss. "Since I'm here, I need you back at the office." He tuned back in to hear Shikaka say, "Public relations are still fighting with communications, so I need you to mediate since they both like you." Naruto heaved a heavy sigh and hauled himself upright. He turned a sheepish grin on Genma. "Sorry, Genma-sensei. I guess we'll have to catch up another time. I promised to talk to Hana and Kanzuya about making the next team dinner much sooner than we've been having them." He waved behind him as he followed Shikaku out of the station, throwing one last salute after them. He slumped back into his seat as the last few minutes replayed in his head. That wasn't something he'd been expecting to learn today. Little Naruto really was all grown up. Chapter 30. The More You Know. The crazy you look Naruto waved off at Jiri as he juggled his pile of papers, trying to balance the toppling pile. Maybe Hijiri had had a point about needing help or making 2 trips, but Naruto was determined to do this in one go. He didn't want to go to the Hokage's office more than he absolutely had to. He tapped the door to the office with his foot, nudging it open with his elbow. He walked into the room and forewent to bow, as that was a recipe for disaster. "Hokage-sama, these are the papers for the Chunin exams you requested." He stopped just in front of the man's desk and waited, just over the papers. He could see the Sandaime raise his head from his own set of documents. The man looked wearier every time Naruto saw him, but he tried to make it point to see him as little as possible. He personally thought that it was long past time that the old man retired. He didn't know who could replace him, but it was long since past the time of the Sandaime. "Thank you, Naruto-kun." The Hokage smiled weakly. "You can place them beside my desk. I'll get to them later." Naruto stepped forward and tried to gently place the pile on the varnished wooden floor. They slipped out of his hands slightly and he hunched forward, keeping them in place under his chin. He finally got them in a stable position and he let go, backing away and retaking his place in front of the Hokage's desk. As he was about to bow and make his escape, the door opened behind him and a small child rushed into the room, holding a kunai above his head and screaming at the top of his lungs. "Today's the day I become the Hokage." Naruto watched the kid immediately trip over his impractically long blue scarf and faceplant in the middle of the office. He raised his head, a red mark on his forehead and tears in his eyes, and he looked frantically around the room. His spiky brown hair bounced with him, and his yellow t-shirt was scrunched beneath him. As the kid's dark eyes latched onto him, he pushed himself quickly to his feet, throwing out an arm in accusation. "You tripped me," he condemned, pointing his finger right at Naruto's face. Naruto just stared back at the child incredulously. He turned to look back at the Hokage to search for an explanation. "This is my grandson, Konohamaru," the Sandaime said fondly. Naruto's eyes snapped back to the still fuming child. So this was the grandson. He remembered when the kid had been born. He'd meant to meet him, but then the Uchiha massacre happened, and things had gotten complicated. "Hey, you tripped me. I want an apology." The kid insisted and crossed his arms. "Don't you know who I am?" "Hokusama just told me," Naruto replied unimpressed. "And you tripped over your scarf, kid. You totally tripped me." Konohamaru scowled. "Okay, whatever you say," Naruto dismissed. He had to get back to work, and he wasn't going to stand here and argue with a kid. "My bad." Konohamaru glared at him for a long moment before a look of realization crossed his face. "You're trying to take down my grandpa before me," he yelled. "You won't win. I'm going to be the one to take him down, and I'll be the new Hokage." Naruto sighed. Was this karma for thinking that the Sandaime should retire? They really did need someone younger, but this was a joke. What was wrong with this kid? You know that's not how it works, right? The Hokage is the strongest in the whole village. Konohamaru scowled. If I beat him, then I'll be the strongest. His logic was technically correct. It was a child's reasoning, but Naruto wasn't sure how to explain the much more complicated selection process. He shook his head. This was ridiculous. He was not here to debate this. He needed to get back to work. His own pile of paperwork was probably growing even as he stood here. It takes a lot more than that to become Hokage, was what he settled for before he bowed low to the village leader and began to walk out of the office. The door was flung open once again, and Naruto huffed a breath in exasperation. Why did everyone decide to come to the Hokage's office while he was there? All he had wanted to do was drop the papers, get out of there, and resume avoiding the Sandaime at any given opportunity. Honorable grandson, Ebisu swept into the room dramatically. He'd run across Gama's genin teammate a couple times in the past, but he didn't know him that well. He always wore bandana over his head like Gama-sensei and a pair of round, black sunglasses that hid his eyes. He was dressed in his usual nondescript navy jounin uniform. He knew the guy had to stick up his ass about things being by the book, but he was a decent shinobi. Hokage-sama, I apologize more profusely for this interruption. Ebisu simpered. Honorable grandson, we must go. It's quite all right, Ebisu. The Hokage smiled gently. I'm always pleased to be able to see my grandson. Hey! This guy tripped me. Konohamaru stomped his foot. He admitted it. Ebisu's gaze snapped to Naruto, ready to reprimand him, but stopped short as he processed who he was. Naruto raised an eyebrow expectantly. While he wasn't Ebisu's direct superior, he'd noticed that shinobi of all ranks had been treating him differently since his promotion. It wasn't just the new Chunin in the office now, but even the seasoned Chunin and Jounin were deferring to him more and more. He wasn't sure why, and he'd made attempts to get them to stop, but it was a fruitless effort. Honorable grandson, I'm sure you're mistaken. Ebisu hesitated. I'm sure Uzumaki meant no offense. How many times do I have to tell you to call me Naruto, Ebisu? Naruto rolled his eyes. You know I hate it when people call me by my clan name, especially when they're older than me. I'm Gama-sensei's student. You don't have to be so formal. Konohamaru's eyes darted back and forth between them in confusion. Now! The kid tripped over his own scarf. Naruto continued firmly. Stop treating him like glass just because he's a Hokage's grandson. You're going to produce a spoiled brat instead of a good shinobi. Treat him like a normal kid. For Kami's sake, he has a name. Now I'm going to go back to my office. Make sure the kid doesn't follow. At those last words, Naruto pushed past the other Tokubetsu Jounin and left the office, slightly annoyed at the exchange. He had enough going to be worried about another kid. He missed Konohamaru's, considering gaze that stuck to him until he was out of sight. A few weeks later, well into the month of June, Naruto found himself once again in the Hokage's office. He stood at attention beside Kazuya, waiting for the Sandaime to speak. The Chunin exams will commence in just under 3 weeks, as you're well aware, and the time for sending out messengers has come. Naruto kept his face neutral. Of course he knew. He'd been one of the ones helping to organize it. It had been a lot of work so far, and Naruto hadn't realized until now how much planning such an event required. Other than IWA, we are sending Jounins to each of the shinobi villages with an invitation and details on the Chunin exams and how to register and attend. Why not use hawks? Kazuya asked. Not secure, Naruto answered for him. They can be intercepted and the details of the RSVPs can be altered. Sending a Jounin means that there is a direct and secure line of communication and decreases the chances of someone using the event to attack us. Indeed, Naruto, the Hokage nodded. I'm sending you two to Kirigakure. Why Kirigakure? Naruto couldn't help but inquire, the choice seeming to come out of the blue. Tanigakure still has a blanket ban on your team, and Kyumo has too much interest after the bingo book incident. Taki, Suna, Aim, and Kusa are being handled by other teams. Kiri is the only one I could send you to. Why send us at all? Kazuya demanded, trying to be respectful in his worry. Naruto is more of a security risk than ever, and he has plenty of information that the other villages would love to get their hands on. Why take the risk? While Naruto is at more risk, he is also more than capable of protecting himself. His A-rank status is more than earned, and between the two of you, you're one of the most capable teams I'm sending out. Naruto narrowed his eyes, scanning the old man's face. There was something different about him. He wasn't acting like himself. Things had been strained between them, but this was something else. But who's going to do my work while I'm gone? Naruto asked dubiously. I'm helping to organize the whole thing. Nemuri and Shikaku will take over your workload. That doesn't explain why it has to be us. The Hokage sighed deeply, folding his hands in front of him. The new Mizukichi has requested an Uzumaki be sent, he admitted carefully. Ryo and his team are not ready for this kind of responsibility, so it has to be you. Isn't it kind of suspicious that they asked for Naruto specifically, especially since the update to the bingo book was only a month or so ago? The Hokage placed his hands flat on the table and rose from his seat. There will be no further discussion on the matter. You are to deliver the invitation to the Mizukichi, find out what they want, and bring their answer back. That is all. You are dismissed. Naruto and Kazuya bowed low and exited the office. As soon as the door closed behind them, Kazuya shook his head, frustration visible on his face. I don't like this, AK-chan, he frowned. We don't have a choice no matter how weird it is. Naruto patted his friend's shoulder. We have our orders. Besides, I'm a bit curious about why they want to see me. To fucking kidnap you is my bet. Kazuya grumbled beneath his breath. Didn't you think the Sandaime was a bit off today? He asked, voicing his thoughts aloud. Isn't he always off around you? There was definitely something off about him. Naruto frowned. He seemed even less thrilled than we are about sending us to Kiri. We still have to go. His friend rolled his eyes. Naruto nudged his shoulder and began to walk towards the desk offices. He had to make sure the desk wouldn't make any mistakes while he was away. He'd sufficiently reamed them for their fuck-ups last time, but he didn't want to take any chances. Naruto took a deep breath of the salty air, the taste lingering on his tongue. They'd been stuck on this boat for 4 days, and as the vessel finally began to approach land, he was more than ready to disembark. He hadn't been seasick like Kazuya had during the first 2 days, but he had firmly decided that the sea was not in his future. Kazuya flopped over the side of the boat dramatically, staring at the approaching land mass with longing. He didn't look ill anymore, but Naruto had rarely seen him so flustered. I think this is officially the worst mission we've ever had, he groaned. The lands of Rivers and Suna have nothing on this. Naruto snorted, and Kazuya turned betrayed eyes on him. Kaz, the Land of Rivers mission went so bad we're still banned, and in Suna we were framed and then attacked by a sleep-deprived Jinchuriki. I hardly think being a bit seasick measures up to those. We haven't been attacked yet. You're just saying that because you don't feel sick, Kazuya said petulantly. Naruto shook his head in amusement. Kazuya could be such a baby when he got ill. Thankfully, it was a rare occurrence. I still don't know why we're even here in the first place, his friend grumbled. I've tried to rack my brains as to why Hokage-sama would risk you on something anyone could do. Naruto nodded. He'd also been thinking the same. After Kimo, it had been assumed that he'd be confined to the village barring any extenuating circumstances. He didn't think this counted, and even Shikaku had mentioned before they left that they'd already had someone to go to Kiri. It had been changed at the last moment to their team. What changed? Something had to have happened recently. Someone didn't want them in the village. Why would someone want them specifically away from Konoha? What had he done recently to cause this? He paused. Oh shit. Kazuya raised an eyebrow at him. What? I think I know why we were sent away. Kazuya heaved a heavy sigh, dropping his head to hand over the edge of the boat. What did you do? I don't think it was a Hokage that was behind sending us on this mission, Naruto continued, not even hearing Kazuya. It had to be someone high enough that the Hokage couldn't just shut them down, so maybe the elders? This must mean I'm getting close. He felt someone shake his shoulders, and he looked into Kazuya's pink eyes. Naruto, what did you do? He said slowly, his grip tight. I've been investigating the Uchiha massacre, he blurted out. There were too many things about that night that didn't add up, and so I've been doing some digging, to find out what really happened that night, why Itachi killed his clan. There are connections to Uchiha Shurisue's suicide that they aren't talking about, and that Uchiha signature I sensed that night. Itachi didn't do it alone. Kazuya let go, taking a couple of unsteady steps back. I've been scanning the signatures around the village, and since I've been training the ANBU, I know their signatures now. Naruto pushed on frantically. There's a cohort of chakra signatures running around Konoha, ANBU level signatures, and I can't find anything about them. I don't know who they belong to. I tried following a couple, but their signature disappeared. The only thing I can think of are seals that block chakra sensing, but why would they be there? Kazuya shook his head in bewilderment. You know what you sound like, right? He stated faintly. You sound like one of those conspiracy drunkards that practically live in the bars. Kez, do you really think that someone could kill a whole clan single-handedly, and no one would notice until it was over? He demanded, frustrated. There's something going on. The Hokage ordered that I lie to everyone about what happened, that there wasn't a second Uchiha. Kazuya switched his gaze back to the approaching shore. Naruto sighed. Maybe he shouldn't have dumped this on Kazuya right now. He'd had years, and the thought was still surreal even to him. He just knew he was right, and Sasuke deserves the truth. All the fallen Uchiha deserve the truth. Look, I'm sorry I never told you, but it's an S-rank secret what happened that night, he offered. The rest of it doesn't make sense without knowing about the stuff that was already being covered up. You can't tell anyone. What? That there's apparently a conspiracy above even the Hokage with invisible Shinobi and the death of a whole clan, and no one knows but you. Kazuya shook his head. No one would believe me anyway. The Sandaime and I might have our differences dash. That's the real reason you fell out, wasn't it? Kazuya interrupted abruptly. It doesn't matter now. Naruto shrugged. There are a lot of things I disagree with him about. Anyway, he wouldn't intentionally put us into a vulnerable position like this. It puts the village in a bad position, too. He was acting strange when he issued us this mission, and it makes me think that he wasn't the one who assigned us it. I think it was one of the elders. It means I'm getting close to something they don't want me to find. Let's just quit talking about it, okay? Kazuya frowned. We have more immediate things to be concerned with than some conspiracy about people who are already dead. Naruto nodded, although he couldn't help the disappointment at Kazuya's reaction. His friend was never one for mysteries. He much preferred to deal with what was in front of him. It's one of the things that made him such a great medic. He was excellent at solving problems and dealing with emergencies, but he was never one for the big picture. A silence emerged between them as they pulled into the harbor. As Naruto followed his teammate off the boat, they were met by two Kirin. One was tall as Kakashi, with bandages acting as a mask and a huge cleaver-like sword strapped to his back. Naruto could sense his wet, roiling chakra. That was a giveaway that he was from Kiri, but Naruto could also taste iron at the back of his throat. The other was much shorter and looked to be about his age. At first glance, Naruto was sure they were a girl, but there was something in their frame that suggested otherwise. Either way, they were beautiful, with two long locks of brown hair framing their heart-shaped face and soft brown eyes, scanning them carefully. Their chakra was cold but not harsh, like freshly fallen snow. It was one of the nicest signatures Naruto had ever felt, a breath of fresh air. "Welcome to Gaio Naval Base," the man announced, crossing his thick bare arms. "I am Momochi Zabuza, and this is Haku. We are to be your guides to your meeting with the Mizukage." Kazuya bowed slightly, and Naruto quickly followed suit. "I am Arai Kazuya, and this is Uzumaki Naruto. Thank you for your consideration." "Uzumaki?" Haku asked, their voice soft. "You did request one," Naruto answered wryly. You must be related to the kid. Zabuza scoffed. Figures there would be more than one. The Kirin began to walk, and Naruto followed. You know Rio? The brat saved our lives. Zabuza admitted reluctantly, although Naruto could detect an undertone of fondness in his voice. Meddling little shit if I ever saw one. That's an Uzumaki trait, Kanzuya piped up, chuckling. Haku slowed down to walk beside him, and Naruto returned their gentle smile. You taught your kin well, Haku complimented. He told me that I could have more than one chance to achieve my dreams, that as long as I was alive, I could try over and over again. I hold those words close to my heart. Warmth flooded through Naruto at their words. He'd heard what had happened in Wave, but he didn't get any specifics. This only reinforced the pride he felt for his little brother. He was growing up into an incredible person. I didn't need to teach Rio anything, Naruto beamed. My brother's brilliant all on his own. You don't look like you're related. Zabuza shot back at them. We get that a lot. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. We take after different parents. He turned to Haku. Thanks for not killing Sasuke. He tilted his head. He means a lot to me. He's family, you know. Zabuza scoffed. Haku's too soft to kill anyone if he can help it. It sounded like an insult, but the love and care in his gaze as he looked back at the other Kirin was unmistakable. The kids weren't in danger with him. They were worthy opponents, although I much prefer them as friends, Haku chuckled. Their conversation died down as the pace began to pick up. Soon they were well on their way to Kirigakure. Rio ducked beneath a branch, his breath leaving him in heavy gasps and sweat pouring down his face. His legs were beginning to burn with the strain of running for so long. He paused to sniff the air, and he lunged in a different direction, desperately trying to get away from his pursuer. He pushed chakra to his ears and heard the almost silent footfalls behind him. The sound pushed him to run faster, having abandoned stealth a while ago. Panic flooded through him as the footfalls grew closer, and before he could blink his chest hit the ground, his head bouncing off the dirt floor. He groaned as the wind was knocked out of him, and as he lay spread-eagled, his limbs turned to jelly. He might not be able to get back up again. He craned his neck back to see the dog sitting on his back, looking far too pleased with himself. Was that really necessary, hey? The hound bared his teeth in a grin and hopped off of him, plunking himself down and watching Rio struggle to haul himself upright. At least it wasn't Bull. Rio had been squashed by the massive bulldog once, and it wasn't something he wanted to experience again. Uhei was a brown and white greyhound with bandages wrapped around his neck, forehead, and ears, and Rio knew for a fact he was one of the best trackers of Kakashi's Ninken. It was totally unfair that Kakashi sent him after Rio. Uhei began to nudge his shoulder, and Rio struggled to his feet, glaring half-heartedly down at the summon. You could have taken it a bit easier on me, he pouted. The greyhound just trotted out in front of him, leading the way back to the others. Rio trudged after him. He didn't know how long he'd managed to evade the hound, but he hoped it was longer than his teammates. After a while, they finally broke through the tree line, and Rio could see Kakashi sitting against Bull, flicking through his orange book. Surrounding him was the rest of the pack in various states of sleep. Baisuke and Guruko had formed a pile with Shiba, while Pakin lounged in a particularly sunny patch of grass. He grinned as he spotted Sasuke and Sakura sitting beside their trackers, in equal states of annoyance. So Akino and Urushi caught you guys, huh? He plopped himself down in front of his teammates, leaning back against Uhei as the hound settled behind him. Who got caught first? Sakura grumbled as Sasuke pointed at her. Akino wagged his tail, and Rio beamed at him. The golden retriever had a long tan coat, with a pair of sunglasses perched on his white snout, and the same navy jacket that all the Ninken wore. The dog nudged Sakura's arm, and she patted his head gently, a smile breaking through her annoyance. He watched Sasuke try to ignore his own dog, Urushi tilting his head and boring his angry-looking eyes into the Uchiha. He looked intimating, with his spiky light brown hair and sharp teeth, but Rio knew that he was really a big softy. All the Ninken were to some extent. You did well, Rio-chan, Packen patted his way towards them. You still have a lot of work to do, but your instincts are as sharp as ever. Kakashi closed his book, and I smiled at them. Ma, you all did better than expected for your first evasion training, he drawled. We'll have to keep at it. Ryo's shoulders sank, and he didn't have to look at his teammates to know that theirs had done the same. Kakashi had been true to his word, and had been taking training more seriously. They were stuck with the dodge training Kakashi got from Gunma, and the man had added daily physical conditioning and taijutsu practice. They had also received a couple of jutsu each to learn, and Kakashi kept ambushing them with genjutsu. Ryo wasn't proud to say that it had once taken him 3 hours to realize he was in one. It had never been his strong point. He could feel himself getting stronger. He could ran further and faster, and things that he had to spend several seconds thinking about were now instinctual. He had noticed a change in his teammates, too. Sasuke had been quiet since they came back, even more than usual, and he attacked the training like it was his last chance to improve. Sakura left Sasuke alone completely now other than official team stuff, and Ryo knew she was doing training outside of this. She'd built up muscle since graduation, and Ryo was now wary of being hit in their taijutsu spars. So are you guys summons? Sakura asked curiously, a hand still curled into Akino's fur. Packen nodded. We are, he said. Kakashi-kun made a contract with us many years ago, and we've been working with him ever since. We are mainly utilized for tracking, but Kakashi has found other uses for us over the years, including babysitting this one. Packen nodded his head in Ryo's direction. The best days were when Kashi-sensei summoned you. Ryo leaned further back, gazing up at the sky in reminiscence. I remember using Bull as a jungle gym, and I'm pretty sure you all let me win at hide-and-seek. So you've really known Kaka-sensei for a long time, Sakura mused, her green eyes switching between them. Yeah, you knew that, Ryo shrugged. My brother had the academy and stuff when I was little, so I had a bunch of babysitters. It was strange to think of back then. He'd been so oblivious of the stuff going on around him. Nissan protected him from a lot. It must have been so hard for Nissan to juggle the academy and looking after him, and whatever else he had going on at the time. Who else? Tenjiro Jizan, Jiji, Tsumba-chan, even Gunma after Nissan graduated. It happened less after we moved into the apartment, and stopped completely after I joined the academy, but I made a lot of friends that way. They were distracted by Kakashi clapping his hands. Okay, my cute little genin, he chirped. Say goodbye to the Ninken because it's time for today's D rank. Ryo dropped his head back onto Uhei's back. He hated D ranks, no matter how important they were to the village. Kakashi better not have them picking up trash again. They stank for days after that mission. Naruto stood with his eyes closed, quietly listening to the world around him. He knew Kanzuya hated it when he did this, but only people with sensing abilities could really understand. He could see more like this. He could feel the Mizukage and a Jounin-level signature beyond the door in front of them. He could feel the bustle of the Kiri Shinobi below them, moving around the building and the civilians beyond, navigating the market. Haku's cold signature had moved away with Zabuza's, and he could feel them lingering somewhere below them. There was a whole world that he could feel, and it was hard to describe. He could always sense the world around him. There was a part of him that was never present in the moment. At this point, he didn't know what it was like to not have this extra information constantly running in the back of his brain. He imagined it was much quieter, but he also thought it would be constricting, to be trapped in his own head. He opened his eyes as the doors opened, and he stepped through the archway, Kanzuya at his heels. The office wasn't as big as the Hokage's, and it seemed colder somehow. The walls were made up of large stone bricks, and they were pretty bare. There were 2 tan cupboards set in the walls either side of the Mizukage desk, and a small picture of the land of water. The carpet beneath their feet, leading to the Mizukage desk, was a deep blue, the fibers being highlighted by the natural light from the wide window behind the Mizukage desk. The woman herself was seated behind a round desk, with a lilac cloth banner hanging about her head and her title engraved into the front of the table. Terumi Mei was an imposing figure, and her scorching chakra was a stark contrast to the room around her. Her long auburn hair was partially tied up into a topknot, with several strands framing her face and covering her right eye. Her dark blue dress showed off her pale shoulders, and her green eyes scanned them contemplatively. Kazuya bowed low as they stopped in front of her, and Naruto quickly followed suit. His eyes flickered over to the man at her side. He could feel him probing. He was a censor. He straightened and turned to look the Shinobi square in the eye. Short, blue hair was spiked up, and a black eye patch covered his right eye. Naruto noticed something about the hidden eye, and he narrowed his own gaze. "Welcome, Konoha," the Mizukage began. "I understand you have something for us." Kazuya moved forward, slowly extending the scroll to her. The man next to her tensed, but she took the scroll and rolled it open, scanning the contents. She placed it to one side and looked back up at them. "Thank you for making the journey to deliver this invitation." Her green eyes latched onto Naruto. "Uzumaki, was it?" Naruto resisted the urge to cross his arms and roll his eyes. He wasn't in Konoha right now. He had to be careful. "Uzumaki Naruto Mizukage-sama," he confirmed. "My teammate is Arai Kazuya. We understand you asked for an Uzumaki specifically." "I did," she acknowledged. "I saw your entry in the bingo book, and I must admit I grew curious. We had a beneficial relationship with the land of whirlpools many years ago, before they were wiped out by Kumo and IWA." She looked him in the eye. "You resemble the Uzumaki of old quite prominently." "I have heard that before," he replied neutrally. "It's truly remarkable," she continued. "Red hair, Fuinjutsu, sensing. Do you have their healing abilities also?" Naruto shrugged. He wasn't sure how to answer that. Whatever healing properties he may have inherited, it wasn't enough to save him. It might just be slowing it down a bit. "If I may interrupt, Mizukage-sama, why did you wish to speak with an Uzumaki?" Kazuya spoke up, eyeing her warily. Naruto closed his eyes and centered his chakra on the woman. The searing, hot chakra was the first thing he could feel, no doubt a product of her bloodline limits. Digging deeper, he could sense the almost damp energy that was shared among all Kiri shinobi. She was strong. Her reserve was huge. His eyes snapped open as he finally found what he was looking for, hidden behind the much more prominent aspects of her signature. If he hadn't known how to find it, it would have been impossible to identify. Perhaps all those years of cataloging chakra signatures were paying off. "What are you doing?" A deep voice cut through his concentration as he felt a chakra signature probe back at him. It was much less experienced and decisive, but it was more than Naruto had felt before. He opened his eyes and met the stern blue eye. "You have sensor of your own, Mizukage-sama. This is Ao." She gestured to him. "He indeed possesses some natural sensing ability. Not much, but more than most people I've met." Naruto nodded, grunting softly as Kazuya elbowed him in the ribs. "No offense, Mizukage-sama." She frowned. "Ao is the most powerful sensor in Kirigakure." Naruto considered her words before he turned fully towards a man. "What can you sense? What can you tell me about Kazuya's chakra signature? How many people are in this building?" Ao was taken aback for a moment, looking at his leader for permission. The Mizukage nodded with her face open and curious. "There are 17 people in this building, and I can differentiate between them," he answered calmly, his back straightening. "I can tell how much chakra your teammate has, and that he is not from Kirigakure." "That's not bad at all," Naruto grinned. "Way more than anyone else I've met. Does the Byakugan help with your sensing?" The man stiffened, and the air grew heavy with tension. Naruto glanced around, confused at the sudden change in atmosphere. He looked at Kazuya, and his friend's pink eyes were screaming something at him. "How do you know about the Byakugan?" The Mizukage leaned forward intently, her expression closed. "It's obvious, isn't it?" he said slowly. His eye, while integrated into the rest of his chakra network, is still distinctive. "It's like a beacon." No one answered him for a moment, and he realized that it was not in fact obvious. He thought he'd gotten better at that. Since Tenzo, he really had tried to keep what he felt to himself, but he slipped up sometimes. He forgot that what he could feel wasn't normal. And you can sense this? She tilted her head. Yeah, Naruto nodded before he remembered where he was. I mean, yes, Mizuki-sama. You asked Ao some questions. She leaned back in her chair, seemingly dismissing the fact he unearthed a village secret. I'd like you to answer them now. He was right about there being 17 people in this building, and I can also separate them by signature. I can also tell you how much chakra training they received, if they have a bloodline limit, their total supply, what chakra nature they possess, and which village and clan they are from. That is not possible. Ao spoke up harshly, scowling deeply. It's taken me years, Naruto shrugged. I've had this ability since I was 3, and I can't turn it off. I also need a few minutes to get most of that information. I only started with the chakra nature aspect 5 years ago. Impressive, the Mizuki smiled, although the edges were sharp. And what is your range? Passively, most of the village. Actively, a few hundred meters beyond the village borders. The Kirin exchanged a look, and Naruto decided to end this. You called for an Uzumaki, not a censor, he stated calmly. Mizuki-sama, you requested me because of your own lineage. He could feel Kazuya burning a hole into the side of his skull. His friend was going to kill him after this. The Mizuki turned to him in surprise. How did you know? It's buried deep, but I can sense it. We're pretty distinctive after all. It's not every day I sense chakra like mine. She stared at him for a long moment, Ao bristling at her side. You are correct, Uzumaki. I am descended from one of the survivors. I have no clan, so you are the closest I have, and I wanted to meet you. I am sorry for the false pretenses. It's okay, he grinned. There's always room for more family. There's so little of us left that we have to stick together, you know? Her eyes widened before a matching smile spread across her face. I am glad you see it that way. Naruto disembarked the boat, glad to be back on friendly soil. It was nice to breathe and not inhale half the sea with it. I'm glad we went. He beamed at Kazuya. They may not be coming for the Chunin exams, but I think it went really well. Yeah, I get what she was saying about still trying to establish herself as a leader, Kazuya answered, shooting a hateful look back at the boat. You, my friend, are a lucky man. There aren't many village leaders who would tolerate how casual you can be. I can't believe I'm related to the Mizuki. Naruto ignored his remark. Rio is going to flip. What about what she was saying about reestablishing the Uzumaki clan? Naruto paused. I've never thought about it before, he admitted. I don't even know the rules about clans. I thought there would have to be more of us. He shook away the thought. Either way, that's something for the future, he grinned. Right now, we have a strong ally in Kirigakure. That's something no one thought would happen. All you need is IWA and you've got the set. Kazuya poked him in the side. Naruto stuck out his tongue at his friend. He wasn't allowed near the land of Earth. Not even Danzo and elders would be that stupid. He dreaded to think of the day that the Tsuchikage found out that the blood of the yellow flash lived on. They picked up the pace and a comfortable silence settled between them. They had a couple of days of running before they would be back in the village. Naruto already had a list a mile long of all the stuff he had to do. It was 3 hours later that something distracted Naruto from his mental to-do list. He tilted his head but kept on running as he tried to pinpoint what it was. He pushed his range out, but he couldn't feel any chakra signatures. Kaz, do you see anything? His friend looked over at him with an eyebrow raised. Should I? I don't know. Kazuya began to slow down, and Naruto joined him. There was something he was missing. He didn't like this feeling. He was normally so in tune with everything around him. It had been a long time since something had surprised him, and he just felt like there was something waiting to pounce. He stopped and closed his eyes, focusing fully on his sensing ability. He still couldn't sense anyone out there. Naruto? He waved a hand at Kazuya as he continued to concentrate. He picked something up briefly, and he focused his energies in that particular direction. There was no chakra signature, but he could feel something. It was small, like an animal but not. It felt familiar too. What was it? Naruto? His eyes snapped open as he clicked. Shit, we need to move. Naruto, what are you sensing? Remember that seal in Konoha? The one that blocked my ability to sense those not Enbu. Yeah, I can't sense any chakra signatures, but I can sense active seals, he said nervously. I'm feeling them moving towards us. I think they stuck those chakra blocker seals to themselves specifically, so they could sneak up on me. Shit. Kazuya ran a hand through his hair. That's premeditated shit. They knew where we would be and when. Naruto's stomach dropped as he got the final number. Kaz, we need to run. His friend snapped his gaze over to him. How many? About 30. Chunin and Jounin at least. Who the fuck did you piss off? Now is not the time. Naruto darted into the bush with Kazuya hot on his heels. He was still running in the direction of where he could sense some of the seals, but they were in every direction. They were surrounded. He could feel the seals speed up after them, and he cursed. The ones up ahead were getting closer. Kaz, we need to split up. What the fuck, Naruto? That's a terrible plan. They're after me. He snapped back. I can draw their attention, and you can go for help. There's no point in both of us getting caught. I am not leaving you. His pink eyes were stern. There are too many, even for you. Too many for both of us. Naruto held his gaze as he stopped in the middle of a clearing. Kazuya hesitated, and Naruto could see the conflict in him. I need you to go for help, Kazuya. He knew there wouldn't be enough time for Kazuya to find help and get back. Not with these numbers, but he wouldn't forgive himself if Kazuya died for something Naruto did. He was the one that pushed the Uchiha investigation, that kept trying to find the not Enbu. Whoever sent these shinobi after him, they weren't after Kazuya. He'd be damned if Ryo lost both his brothers. For Ryo, Kazuya sent him a filthy look. I'm going to give you hell when I see you again, he hissed. You hear me? I can't wait. Kazuya vanished into a shunshin as Naruto sent out a huge pulse of chakra into his surroundings, alerting the enemy to his location. Kazuya reappeared somewhere to his left, and while he hadn't quite escaped them all, he stood a much better chance. Naruto pulled out some kunai and palmed them, settling into a defensive stance. He only saw a headband with a single music note before they descended on him. Thank you for watching part 6 of What If Naruto Parents Died and Naruto Becomes Shinobi to Protect His Brother. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Anime T23 for more exciting What If scenarios and anime content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next part.